All right, Freddie, welcome to the studio, boss. How you doing?
Thank you. I'm doing well. Thank you for having me.
Okay, so you saw the video of Mount Kinabalu,
I did.
yeah?
I did.
And what'd you think?
One of the first things I thought of was, just being able to unplug.
Oh,
That's one of the first things that kind of hit my mind was you just seemed like you were peaceful. It was just unplugged. I didn't see any headphones in your ears or anything. It's just enjoying nature. But it was a beautiful scene.
hmm.
A beautiful scene. So
I mean, that episode in Malaysia where we climbed Mount Kinabalu that you saw on YouTube, that silent trek, that's kind of like a microcosm of what my whole life was like for years. Like we would go out 250, 300 days a year, we'd film, we'd be out in nature all the time, we'd be sleeping in tents and sleeping bags. And I tell you, I don't think I've ever been as healthy mentally or physically as that time. Because you're right, you disconnect from society
yeah.
and you disconnect from like every single thing in this planet, that's man-made that just drags you down.
But I see kind of the hard part would be you kinda spend a lot of time in your own head, so
Yeah, you got to be comfortable in your own head. But honestly, like if you're not fighting a lot of demons and stuff like that,
Yeah.
then it's really peaceful and wonderful and cleansing. And again, too, this like this rhythm of living with the natural like vibrations and the natural rhythm of the earth, like going to bed at 6 p.m. when it gets dark, waking up at 6 a.m. when the light comes up,
Yeah.
you know, eating a few times a day when you're hungry, not because you're being forced to, because you're working around a different schedule, and then just walking like 20, 30,000 steps a day. We were doing anywhere between 10 and 20 miles a day on foot. So this idea of like waking up early, getting out, walking, of course, walking, not high impact, not running.
Right.
You're not hurting your joints, but you're just this constant steady movement. And I tell you, I felt so healthy because I really believe that, like, obviously we've evolved from that.
Yeah.
So there's something deep inside us in our DNA and in our soul, in our psyche that craves that again.
Yes. I absolutely agree with that. I used to be, an avid runner. I'm getting slowly back into it after all my surgeries and stuff.
Yeah.
But, when I used to run a lot, I would run with music and kinda keep myself going. But then after a while, I just said, I don't not only do I not need it, it would just get on my nerves after a while,
Yeah.
and just get to relax and get into your own thoughts. And, with running, once you hit that runner's high,
Mhm.
it's just like, yeah, I don't need any music or anything and just kind of, really get your thoughts straight.
It's beautiful, isn't it?
Yeah, it is.
Yeah.
It
I
is.
miss it a lot. Like I get glimpses of it every now and then. Like I probably still go out maybe once every 2 months for maybe, a little 7 or 10 day trip here and there.
Mhm.
But it's not like these big 2 week trips with the guys, with the whole crew and everything that we used to do.
Yeah.
But I'm still trying to keep it alive a little bit. Like I was in Joshua Tree. I walked across Joshua Tree National Park a couple weeks ago.
Yeah.
I was in Ecuador a little bit before Christmas. That was amazing. In Greenland last summer. So I'm like still trying to pick away at some of these amazing things. I just put them out on YouTube, and the response has been really, really
Yeah,
quite
I
wonderful.
mean, yeah, I like watching that, It's just watching someone be able to just get away like that and see nature again,
Yeah.
it's awesome.
Well, YouTube has these statistics, these analytics, right? And when you can go to this little tab, it says revenue, and when you go down to the bottom, it tells you like how you make your revenue. Like,
Mhm.
is it people watching your videos and getting ads, or is it shorts, and people getting ads? But the majority of my revenue comes from people with premium subscriptions
Really?
who are just kind of surfing around watching stuff,
Yeah.
and they just really kind of like get into the adventure videos and then the podcast as well. So I'm super happy people are watching and enjoying.
Yeah, I'm sure there's a bit of jealousy because we all wanna be able to do those kinds of things, so that's great.
It does come with a cost, I tell you. Like turning your back on civilization for a decade
Yeah.
does come with some cost, but I'll tell you the benefits far outweigh the costs if you can deal with coming back into reality. And that's what kind of, March 2020, that was the big throwback into reality, or else I would have stayed out there for decades.
Oh. Yeah, and I'd imagine when you do come back, then it's, trying to figure out what exactly is going on in the world and everything, and, trying to catch up.
This is my therapy.
Yeah. Yeah.
We're in session, doctor.
Yeah, that's tough. That's tough.
No, it's yeah, it's been interesting, but I'm working on moving back in towards that like space, but I'm gonna be doing next. This is like the next phase of my life and careers. I'm gonna be living really out in the wild a little bit, and still doing the podcast and commuting to a location where there'll be a studio
Yeah.
where I'll come in for like a week and meet a whole bunch of amazing people and do the podcast. But then for like 3 weeks of every month, I'll be really offline and
Wow.
in a remote place.
That's pretty cool.
Yeah, I need it. I need to be like hiking and climbing every day, I think.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's pretty cool.
Even without the cameras, I think I just need it for my mental health and my soul.
Yeah. Yeah. I could imagine. I could imagine.
So look, we met a couple months ago, and thank you so much for finding the time to swing by today. And we're gonna get into your whole cybersecurity teaching and your whole cybersecurity background. I love this about you, and we got off to a roaring chat when we had lunch a couple months ago. But I'd love to just start at the beginning. So where are you from?
Well, so I was born in Maryland, in Takoma Park, right outside DC. But then I think before I turned one, my family moved back to Atlanta. Both of my parents were born and raised in Atlanta, and so we lived down there till I was about 8 years old. Then we moved to New Jersey. So the interesting part about that is, um, in Tacoma Park as well as down in Atlanta, I I lived in an all black neighborhood. I think we had one white family in our neighborhood in Atlanta, but it was all black.
Was
Eh,
it still pretty segregated in Atlanta in those times?
Um, Outside the city, definitely was,
Yeah.
but we were in the city, so yeah. I mean, it was more voluntary segregation
Yeah.
than anything else. But yeah, as you got into the outskirts, then yes, it was pretty tough. You had some sundown towns and stuff like that. But what was interesting was the culture shift in moving from an all black neighborhood in Atlanta, middle class neighborhood, and then we first went to Point Pleasant Beach, New Jersey, and Point Pleasant it's on the South Shore of New Jersey, and we lived across the street from the beach, and it was interesting because we were the only black family in the area. And so we had this big bay window in the front, and people would, as they're walking down the street, they would walk up to the bay window and just look at us. It
Oh,
was like,
really?
yeah, it was honestly like a fishbowl. It was just, wanting to see, this is what black people are.
That's
Yes,
ridiculous.
it was pretty crazy. So we moved from there, and we were only there for like I think maybe 4 months,
Mhm.
and then we rented a home in Toms River, New Jersey,
Okay.
which is predominantly Italian area. We were one of two black families in the area. The other black family, the kids were a lot younger than us, so nobody we could play with. So basically, in terms of, and they were all girls, so I was the only black boy in the area,
Mhm.
and so I had my little trials and tribulations there. Getting jumped on the playground and all of that kind of stuff. So we stayed there for 3 or 4 years, and we did a lot because my father, his job would relocate him in different places, and so from there we moved to a suburb of Pittsburgh, Mount Lebanon,
Mhm.
which is just south of the city. And so we moved from a predominantly Italian neighborhood to a predominantly Jewish neighborhood in New Jersey. Even as crazy as things were, I did actually have a couple of friends there,
Okay.
and it got to a point where there was one of the bigger kids in the neighborhood who just took it upon himself to make sure that no one beat me up anymore. So,
Oh,
so I had a little bit of comfort there. Whereas when we moved to Mount Lebanon, it, there was no friends.
yeah.
Like there was zero.
That must have been rough.
It was, and I was naturally a pretty depressed kid anyway, so that just kind of drove me even deeper into depression. And what made it worse was I have my older sister who's 2 years older than me, and she's one of those kind of people that could make it anywhere.
Mhm.
You could probably put her in the middle of a Klan rally and they'd all fall in love with her. She just has that kind of personality, that just kind of way about her. which is the exact opposite of me.
Right.
So I, I was a shy, introverted, pretty depressed kid. And so being in those circumstances just, just made matters worse. And then we stayed there for a little over a year. And then we finally settled down in Maryland in a suburb of DC and Baltimore, Columbia. And that's a pretty diverse area. And that's where we stayed till I got out of high school and went in the army.
Wow. What a journey.
Yeah.
It's crazy how like people kind of in their late 40s and 50s still have like horrible memories of their childhood, being racially segregated, being picked on and stuff like that. Even today, like you don't think of it happening, but 40, 50 years ago, this country was still a complete mess.
It
Yeah.
was, but I tell you that as I got older, I start to have more fond memories, at least of the New Jersey part.
Hmm.
Excuse me, because of I at least from the adults, I didn't feel anything.
Hmm.
From some of the kids, were pretty cool. I didn't really have a lot of problems. It was when I got to school, it was when things got a little ugly. But in the neighborhood, I actually had some friends and everything was fine. But yeah, and in Mount Lebanon, that was just a whole different animal. It was just it was rough.
Yeah. Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it was rough.
Last week I had a friend on. He's a professor at USC. His name's Henry, and he grew up in Atlanta. And he's probably like 30 years older than us. And he was just telling some horror stories about racial segregation and stuff like that, which is why I was asking because he was saying like just like an hour outside of Atlanta is where the Klan would meet every like year and stuff like that. And he said like people of his generation, which is probably the next generation up from ours or behind ours, he was like, you either joined the Klan or you became a compassionate, human being that was going to accept all people, and like there was no middle ground.
Yeah.
Like when he was growing up in like the 50s, right?
Yeah.
And of course, we probably grew up in the 70s and 80s, and everything was a little bit better then. But now, like even still, kids that grow up today, they probably have no idea what it was like for people like yourself.
They
And
they they really don't, and that's one of the pieces that kind of frustrates me because people talk so much about, what they call racism today, and it's like, you have no idea.
right.
Honestly, you have no idea. I mean, when we've gotten to a point where we're talking about, micro expressions, I'm like, okay, that's
Mhm.
maybe we should be celebrating this. I don't know shit. If that's the worst thing that's gonna come at me,
Yeah,
a microaggression, then you know,
no problem.
yeah, yeah,
Like, I remember, like, because I grew up in Toronto, Canada. I was born just outside Toronto, Canada, and then I grew up in the city. And even in the city, like now today, Canada is a really multicultural country. It's welcomed immigrants from all over the world. But back in the day, like I remember going to grade school, and we didn't have any people of color. Like we didn't have any Asians, we didn't have any people who were born in Canada or immigrated from Asia, of Asian descent. We didn't have any African American people. We didn't have like it was just all Caucasian kids all looked the exact same. It was like, I mean, it was like we were just turning out, white 10-year-olds, like just cranking them out of the suburbs, right? And it was hilarious. And it wasn't until really I got to university where I started getting a chance to meet people from other backgrounds and other ways of life. And at the University of Toronto, like there's 60,000 students, and a lot of them are from, it's amazing. They're from all over the world. So it gives you like a real impression. And that was in the 90s.
yeah.
And yes, it's a wild journey we've been on. And you're right. I don't think kids growing up today have any respect for what people in the 70s and 80s went through, like yourself.
Yeah, and what I went through was nothing compared to what my parents went through. I mean, my father was one of the first black bus drivers in Atlanta.
Mhm.
He was born and raised there. Both of my parents are what you call Grady babies. Grady was the main hospital in Atlanta, so that's where most of the black folks there were born. But yeah, I mean, comparing what I went through to what my parents went through, I mean, what I went through was nothing
Yeah,
compared to what they went through. So, it's all relative. It really is.
yeah. So, I mean, what made you think about joining the U.S. Army?
So it wasn't my idea.
There you go.
It really wasn't. I was pretty much a knucklehead kid.
Yeah.
You know, I was an angry kid. I didn't really have a good reason to be angry. I was just I just think my whole life I was just angry. I don't even know why.
Mhm.
And
Did that come from your parents at all? Like, did one of your parents have a bit of a temper or anything?
no, it was just I don't know. I think that I was born that way.
Mm,
I used to blame my parents for leaving Atlanta and and moving me to New Jersey, and then my mother would always say, "Yeah, but you weren't happy there either." And I was like, "Yeah, it's true."
mm,
So I think I was just one of those kids that just wasn't gonna be happy no matter where he was. But in high school, I got into a little bit of trouble. Um, and didn't do well in school.
mhm.
I scored high on tests, but I hated doing homework and projects and all of that kind of stuff. Excuse me. So, my fourth year of high school, I said my fourth year, not my senior year. I just stopped going.
Yeah.
I said, what's the point?
Mhm.
I was so far behind, at least in terms of my grades and everything. And my mother worked out a deal with my principal, and he basically told me, if you come to summer school for both sessions and get at least a B, I'll give you your diploma.
Oh, that's a nice deal.
Yeah,
Yeah.
because they knew that it wasn't for lack of knowledge.
Mhm.
It was just laziness. It was just, you know.
Well, did you call bullshit on the system? Or, I mean, that, because that's kind of what forces like young kids to tune out, right? Like some
Yeah.
kids are just, because when we look at our education system and we look at the world we live in today, there's a huge gap between what's being taught and what we actually need. And some kids are aware of that in high school. Like
Yeah.
some kids are like, this is actually bullshit. Like we don't need to learn any of this stuff to succeed in the real world. And I'm just curious, like if that ever crossed your mind, or you just hated kind of having this
I would
control
love
over
to
you.
say that was me,
Yeah.
but I would be wrong. I mean, I was just a depressed kid.
Yeah.
I was just a depressed kid. I think that if high school had been just what I wanted, I still would have found a way to not like it.
Yeah.
So I went through those 2 terms of summer school, got my diploma, and I didn't know what to do with myself. Because of my SAT score, I had an ability to go to one of the local colleges, and I was like, I don't want to go. I hated school,
Mm.
and so
Why would you sign up for another 4 years of
yeah,
school?
exactly. So I came home one day from work, and my parents were like, "Come on in the living room," and there was an army recruiter on the couch,
Oh, wow, they did that for you. Yeah.
and it was one of the greatest things they ever did for me.
Really?
Yeah.
So what's it like? So you're not doing well in school.
Mhm.
You're depressed, you're angry, like, and then you get kind of shocked by having this army recruiter on the couch. Like, did you sit down and listen to what he or she had to say, or were you just kinda angry at your parents for doing this behind
I
your back?
honestly, I wasn't, because I was just tired of being the way I was.
Yeah.
I was real, but I didn't know how to get out of it.
Mm.
And so that was one of the things, because for me, quitting high school like that, that's so different from my family.
Mm.
My father skipped 12th grade, my mother skipped ninth grade, my older sister skipped 11th grade, so I was really a trailblazer.
Mhm.
I was,
In your own direction. Yeah.
yeah, I came from education. I came from education, and I didn't want to do any of that, and I tell my younger sister, that, you're welcome, because I took all the pressure off of you.
Mm.
So,
Yeah.
she didn't have to skip grades. But yeah, so I was the first person in my family not to go to college.
Oh, wow. Okay.
Yeah.
I mean, did you feel any pressure around that?
Yeah, I did. I
Yeah.
did. But at the time, I don't know, I was in my own head too much,
Yeah.
and was just angry at the world, angry just for no reason. I didn't have a good reason.
'Cause my dad was born in the '40s and my mom was born in the '50s, and my dad went to university, my mom didn't, but they were absolutely adamant that I would go to university and, like, that I would be, the generation that carries on this idea of, like, higher education, and if I didn't go to university, I think my dad would have lost his shit.
Well, my dad did, because it wasn't just about going to college.
Mm.
It was about going to Morehouse, because my father went to Morehouse.
Oh.
My mother went to Spelman. Both of my sisters went to Spelman. And so, going down there to one of those major HBCUs like that, that was a big deal.
What's an HBCU?
Historically Black College University.
Okay, okay.
Yeah. So Morehouse and Spelman are Morehouse is a male college and Spelman's a female college, and but the level of education in there is, I mean, it's elite.
Mhm.
It really is. It's hard to get in. Um,
And where are those located?
they're both in Atlanta.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So my parents didn't leave Atlanta for a lot of years. They were born, raised, just didn't leave there for a lot of years. But but yeah, so it wasn't just that I didn't go to college. It was you didn't go to Morehouse,
Mm.
you know.
It's
So
a lot of pressure.
it was.
Yeah.
And it ended up translating to my younger sister, because when my younger sister got through high school, she had scholarships at other colleges. And my mother said, "Yeah, that's fine, but my money's going to Spelman."
Oh, wow. Wow. She put her foot down.
Yeah, yeah. So yeah, that's just the way it was. I mean, my family was huge on education,
Mhm.
and
Did you ever play any sports or anything like that? Because I know sometimes, like for me personally, I think I would have had a lot of difficulty getting through high school. Not academically, like that was fine, but just boredom wise, I think I would have had a lot of trouble getting through high school if I wasn't so athletically busy. That,
Mhm.
and of course you had to keep your grades up to be on the team. So I felt like that kind of helped me get through school. Did you play any sports or anything like that, or?
So I didn't play like organized sports,
Sure.
but a lot of, basketball, after school, that's what we did. I mean, we played basketball for 3 or 4 hours after school,
Mm,
but I didn't have the grades to play on the team.
yeah,
So I just played.
that's good.
Yeah.
So I mean, were you intimidated by this idea of joining the army?
Yes, but that's why I wanted to do it.
Oh, like facing your fear.
Yeah. I I I I've always hated fear.
Yeah.
And so I'm still trying to get over some of my little fears, like my fear of heights, which is why when I was in the army, I tried to go airborne because I was like, well, this maybe will help me get over my fear of heights. But I figured that I would do well on the other side of going through basic training and all those types of things. Plus, I had a guy that I went to high school with. In fact, I had lunch with him a couple of weeks ago. He lives down here in San Diego, but he went to the army. He went to basic training after 11th grade.
Oh, wow, that was early.
Yeah. And then he did his senior year and then went in. And so I talked to him after my parents did that. I had a lot of discussions with him and with others about what's the best way to go about this. And I started getting excited, even though I was still scared, but I was excited because I was figuring on the other side of this would be a better person.
Yeah.
So, and I needed it.
Yeah, part of like your transition,
Yeah.
from being a child to being an adult.
It did.
Yeah.
And that's what my father said. He said that's what changed me was the army.
Interesting.
And he's absolutely right.
So the rules in the United States are that you have to be 18 years old to join the army. Is that
Yes.
correct? Yeah.
Yeah. And so what I did was I was what they call a DEPR, or delayed entry program. And so in the delayed entry program, because I was still 17, my birthday wasn't until September. And so my parents had to sign, which, of course they didn't have a problem doing. And, and then you kind of go through a process, and it's a little bit different, but you can go to basic before you turn 18.
Hmm.
But if I remember correctly, in order to go to AIT, which is Advanced Individual Training, that's where you learn about your actual specialty. I think you do have to be over 18 for that.
Interesting. So you sign up and then you do basic training first. And what does that entail?
So I did basic training at Fort Dix, New Jersey. And what it is you have three phases. You have red phase, white phase, and blue phase. The red phase is where they break you down, where nothing you do is right. They're yelling at you and screaming at you for everything. And when I was was around the tail end of them still being able to push us around and all of that kind of stuff.
The good old days.
Yeah. 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 Yeah.
Yeah.
So that's your red phase, which is, maybe 2 or 3 weeks.
I feel like that's the phase we see in all the movies, right? Where everyone's just the drill sergeant is yelling at everyone for doing everything wrong.
That's red phase, and that's the only one. They don't show white phase or blue phase. So white phase is more of like a training phase. That's where you first get introduced to the M16, which is like an AR platform rifle, where you first start doing a lot of tactical maneuvers and stuff like that. Drill and ceremony, you're marching, all that kind of stuff. Um, they're still beating up on you a little bit, but not nearly as much. Now they're just beating up on you when you do something wrong,
Hmm.
and then you go to blue phase, and at blue phase, you're kind of you're honestly unfazed by whatever they tell you because you've already been through the worst, and so they can yell and scream all they want to. You're just kind of like, okay, I'm fine. But
But that's the whole point, right? Like
yeah,
that's how that they want to build you up to that
yes,
point. Yeah.
and it does actually work. And what it does also, it forces you to depend on your team.
Hmm.
Because you go in as an individual, but you come out as a team, and understanding that you have to, at some point put your life in someone else's hands.
So you go into basic. How many people are in your group at basic training?
So you have, I think in our squad, we may have had maybe 9 or 10 people. So you got squad and then your platoon.
Mm.
Platoon is normally like 3 or 4 squads, and then you kind of go on from there, squad, then company and battalion, brigade. And so it just gets bigger and bigger. But yeah, I mean, we were in an 8-man room, so there was, 8 of us in there, with bunk beds, you
Yeah.
know.
And how many of them would have quit during the red, or the white, or the blue phases?
So there's really not a situation of quitting
Because
in basic.
I feel like they want to break you down and kick out the weak people, right?
They do, but so what they have when you first get to basic training, they give you what they call the MOT briefing, or moment of truth briefing. So it's like, at this very moment, you're gonna be in the army. So if you want to bow out, do it now. And you may have 1 or 2 people do it, but then, like in red phase, you have people who try, but it's not that easy.
To quit.
It's not that easy. You can, but it's really not going to look good for you if you do.
Wow, it's intense.
Yeah.
And so, how long does the red, white, and blue phase last for?
So basic training is roughly 8 to 10 weeks, as a whole.
Yeah.
I mean, you have your in processing before you even start red phase, and then you have a little portion after blue phase, and so it's I think it's roughly 8 to 10 weeks. Yeah.
And what was your I mean, like, were you just a completely different human being from the beginning to the end of just that basic training?
It helped.
Yeah.
It definitely helped. Um, I had to motivate myself to do more. Also, not getting any sleep was a little rough on me, and getting to your bunk if you're lucky by 11 o'clock or midnight, and then them waking you up at 4 a.m. and having to
Jesus.
get up. That's where I got introduced to this wonderful drink called coffee. You know, I was never a coffee drinker
Mm.
before then, but I was just like, you're so tired, and during white phase, you're in a lot of classes,
Mm.
and you're so tired, and you don't want to fall asleep in the class because then you'll really get punished.
Mm.
And so if you're about to fall asleep, you're supposed to stand up and walk to the back of the class, and just that way you can stand up.
What phase is it where, like, you put a 40-pound pack on your back with a rifle and go running for 10 miles in the rain?
That's blue phase.
That's the last.
Yeah, yeah. So yeah, we do they call it a ruck march, but it's not really marching. You're actually running.
Mhm.
And I think that we did 12 to 15 miles, something like that. I don't remember.
Every day?
No, just the one time.
Okay.
Just the one time. And it was one of those things that you had to complete to get through basic.
Wow.
Yeah.
So, I mean, like, if you go in there with a bad attitude, or if you go in there as someone who doesn't like taking taking advice or taking direction from authority, I mean, you're gonna get broken down really quickly.
It's gonna be hard for you.
Yeah.
I mean, there are people who came in as knuckleheads and left knuckleheads, but for the most part, you're gonna be changed by the experience. Absolutely gonna be changed by it.
And what was I mean, where did you, I mean, so when you get through basic training, I guess what they by the end of that, they can kind of figure out where you're gonna fit.
No, before you actually go to basic training, you got to go to the MEP station. That's the military entry processing station. I think that's what it is. But the MEP station is where you do your initial paperwork, your initial medical stuff, and that's where you decide on your MOS, your military occupational specialty.
Mm.
And so you pick that before you even go to basic.
But okay, so like, so before you go to basic training, like, I mean, I mean, what are the choices? I mean, are you just writing in a blank space like I want to be a spy, or I want to be like James Bond, or I want to be a sniper, or
Yeah.
whatever else the media throws into our heads at a young age?
So everything comes down to what they call the ASFAB, Armed Services Vocational Aptitude Battery. Well, I'm talking about military. I'm going to have a million abbreviations and acronyms, so that's just what it is.
I love this.
But the ASFAB is almost like the SAT, and depending on how high you score, and then they couple that with the needs of the Army, and then they give you kind of a range of you can have these. And I scored in the top 1% of the Army, so I was eligible for everything.
Hmm.
And so I wanted intelligence.
That's wild that you basically turned your back on formal education and then scored within the top 1% of the entire army.
Well, I always tested well, but even in high school, there were days I would come in, ace the test, and leave. So it wasn't that I wasn't learning. I just, uh, you know,
They just weren't motivating you in the same way, maybe, or you just weren't excited about it.
I wasn't motivated. I don't think anybody could have motivated me back then.
No.
But but yeah, so I scored high on the ASVAB. So when I got to the MEP station, they gave me a range, and I wanted intelligence. I was determined to be in intelligence. And initially, they said, "Well, we can't give you that." And I was like, "Why not?" And they gave me some little stupid reason. I said, "Well, I'm leaving." And in those stations, they're really big on the recruiting numbers. And so they made me take a test that normally they don't give to people until AIT, but they made me take it at the MEP station,
Mhm.
and I aced that too, so they had to give it to me.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
So you went through basic training knowing that you were probably going to end up as an intelligence officer in some way, shape, or form.
Well, an intelligent soldier, but yeah, not an officer.
Right. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
But I mean, just so, but you're in the army, so you're gonna be working for the army in intelligence. Like,
Yeah.
it's not like you're gonna end up in the CIA, because the moment you say intelligence, people automatically think like, oh, CIA or NSA or something like that.
Yeah, and it's different, and it was a lot different than what I thought it was gonna be. I was a what they call a SIGINT analyst or a signals intelligence analyst, and I'm as I'm going through school and everything, I'm thinking that I'm gonna be, sitting in this building, drinking coffee, looking at screens and stuff like that, which is actually where I was supposed to go. But then around the end of AIT, I got approached by a recruiter to take an add-on course. They're like, "Yeah, if you take this add-on course, this will be good for promotion points and everything." And I'm stupid. I'm, 18, and I'm just like, "Okay, yeah, it sounds good. I want promotion points."
Hmm.
Because I was just in like a E1 or E2 at the time,
What's E1, E2?
private.
Okay.
I was just a private.
Yeah.
And so I was like, "Yeah, I want to do it." But what I didn't realize was, so they sent me to the course. It's the electronic warfare analyst course. It was at Fort Devens in Massachusetts, which Fort Devens is no longer there. So I went to that add-on course, and what I didn't realize, but because I went to that course, I could only go to tactical assignments. I couldn't go to any strategic assignments. And so when you're thinking about tactical assignments, you're talking about actually being out there, with the infantry and the artillery and everybody else. Whereas in a strategic assignment, your area of responsibility is broader.
Hmm.
It's very broad.
But you're not on the battlefield.
No,
No.
no.
But did that guy trick you to like force you to be in the battlefield by taking that extra course?
He tricked a bunch of us because a bunch of us fell for it.
Yeah.
Because I mean, like I said, we didn't know any better. We were like, "Oh, cool, extra course. This will be extra for promotion and everything else." And so yeah, so I left Fort Devens and got sent to Germany and ended up with the Third Infantry Division in Würzburg, Germany for 2 years.
Wow. It's so confusing to me, like from the outside looking in, and maybe it is to some of the viewers and listeners as well. Like the army is such a bureaucracy. Like there's obviously the U.S. Army, the biggest, most powerful military in the world. Like, but there's just like finding a way to navigate through all of that without having like a mentor or a guidance counselor, for example. Like just figuring out how to find your own place in that massive, military industrial complex. Like it's just, I would find it so confusing.
Well, I learned to seek out mentors. So I
Yeah.
did eventually have people when I got to Third Infantry Division that kind of mentored me and brought me along and helped me out a lot. But one of the things that I learned being over there, which is one of the things people don't understand about the military, 'cause they think in the military your fear is of your supervisor and the people above you, which is in no way true.
Mm.
Your fear is of your peers.
Why is that?
Excuse me. Because when you're in a situation that's life or death, when you don't do your job, you're putting everyone else in danger. And so whoever is slacking off, they're going to catch it from the rest of the team.
Hmm.
So you don't have to worry about your platoon sergeant or anybody else coming down on you. Your peers are going to say, "Hey man, you got to get yourself together. You're not doing your part and you're going to put us all in danger."
So it's like you self-regulate.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It forces you to, and it's a good kind of peer pressure.
That's good. Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, it's a little bit like, like sports to some degree, like where, you've got, for example, like 15 people on a team and, you all have to train together, work together so that you're all at the same level. And anyone who can't reach that level is kind of pulling the whole team down, except in this case, potentially life threatening situations.
Yeah.
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 That's wild. That is scary.
But it was great because I learned so much.
Mm.
I had I still had some run-ins. I still had a little knucklehead in me.
Mm.
And I had some issues where that I got into a good bit of trouble over there. And I actually
In Germany?
in Germany.
Yeah.
Yeah, I actually got demoted at one point, and they did what they call non-judicial punishment. It's what they call an Article 15, and what it is 2 weeks barracks restriction, 2 weeks extra duty, and and in my case, it was a reduction in rank. And a lot of it was because I got into too many fights over there,
Mm.
and I couldn't let people say what they wanted to me. I just couldn't take it.
What, like, was it just kind of like the same kind of shit you were getting in basic training, or was it?
No, no, and it was just people all around. So like in Germany, you have a lot of civilians over there. You have a lot of civilians who went to high school over there, but just stayed over there. And so you had people your own age that weren't in the military, and you see people at the club or whatever or on the basketball court or whatever. And yeah, I don't know. A lot of it was part of my internal anger, and so I got into way too many fights. And even though I was good at what I did, my commander, after, because he probably should have demoted me a few times before that,
Hmm.
but he kept giving me second, third, and fourth chances. And then he was like, "Yeah, I have to. I don't have a choice."
You think all that hard work and basic training and stuff like that, and then, further training and further, you think that would have like beaten that anger out of you somehow?
You would hope.
You would hope,
You would hope.
but the
But
but the force is strong in you.
yeah, but I needed something of my own.
Uh,
And so when I finally, you know, when they finally had enough of me, and I had to spend 2 weeks in my room and everything, and extra duty and all that kind of stuff. It made me do a lot of thinking,
mhm.
and I was one of those kids that throughout high school, I was one of those people that blamed everybody else for my problems,
Mhm.
and, well, this happened because this person did this and that person did that, and I ran out of people to blame.
Mhm.
So because there was just no one to blame. It had to come back on me. And so I spent a lot of time in my room. I cried. I just did all I just and I remember and my mother still remembers this. I called her one day and I said, "I can't live like this anymore." and she thought I was suicidal. I was like, no, no,
Yeah.
no. I'm not trying to kill myself. I can't be like this anymore.
Yeah.
And that's when I started to really start doing more work on myself. And interestingly, my parents came over my second year in Germany and brought my sisters and everything. And my father, I see him in the airport, and he just had this look on his face that I had never seen from my father. He said, "You're a man now."
Hmm.
He said he could just see it. He says to this day that he could just see that at that point I was actually a man, and he was just so proud at that point, but at the time I hadn't told him all the dumb stuff I did to get to that point,
Right.
but,
Right. Part of it.
yeah.
So altogether, like, how long were you in the military for?
So it was just under 6 years.
Okay.
So I did 2 enlistments. Well, I was medically separated during my last enlistment, because going back to when I was in school in Texas, Goodfellow Air Force Base, Texas, for the Signals Intelligence School, um, got into something, still don't know what it was, chemically, and I had a lot of physical problems, a lot of medical issues, and I ended up getting adult onset asthma because of that.
Oh, wow.
And so my running just became horrible after. I was never really fast, but I was pretty good, and just everything just kind of went downhill after that in terms of my lungs and everything. When I was in Germany, being in an infantry unit, you really don't do a lot of running because you're always out in the field, you're always out doing stuff. And so they don't we didn't really do as much physical training or PT that a lot of units did.
Mhm.
And so I was able to be okay with that. But when I got down to Fort Gordon, Georgia, which was my last duty station, and they wanted me to run a lot, it really just kind of got to me.
Yeah.
And so I was medically separated. I think it was maybe 4 months before I was actually supposed to what they call ETS or internal service. So yeah.
What was that like having to be kind of separated from the whole team?
Well, I was still with the team because in at Fort Gordon was more of a they were a tactical unit, but they start off as a strategic unit. And so you had people who had never been to the field before. And so part of what I did was I trained a lot of the unit on how to go to the field.
Hmm.
I was the only licensed Humvee driver in the unit and all those different types of things, just trying to help people get used to it. So I was still able to do a lot of that, even while I was going through the medical board.
Mhm. But you never got deployed to the Middle East or anything like that. So the craziest was Germany.
Yeah.
Yeah. And what years were that?
91 to 93.
Okay. So that was pretty peaceful for the most part, I think, right?
Yeah. I loved Germany.
Yeah.
Absolutely loved it over there.
Was that just outside Heidelberg? Because there's a big military base just outside. I was there at that big military base just outside of Heidelberg.
Würzburg is it's on Autobahn 3.
Uh-huh.
It's like smack dab between Nuremberg and Frankfurt. It's
Okay.
like the northern tip of Bavaria.
Okay.
Yeah.
Good spot.
But I know Heidelberg. Yeah, I've been to Heidelberg and
Beautiful, isn't it?
oh yes, there. Very nice.
Yeah.
Very nice.
I filmed there a few years ago, and we went to the old military base that was there because they turned it into like an art co-op now. So they've kind of refurbished the whole place. So it was pretty interesting. But to think like that at one time there were like 30,000 U.S. soldiers living there.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I loved Germany. In fact, when I got out of the army, at one point I was trying to get a contract job and go back. I just really enjoyed it over there.
So what's it like? Like 6 years of this like regimented life. Like you always know what you're going to do every day. You've always got orders. You've always got a place to be. You've always got things to do. And then after 6 years of that, like what's it like transitioning out of the military back into like regular civilian work? And then what kind of work were you looking for?
Well, the army isn't really as regimented as people think. You know,
Bring the truth. I want to know.
Oh,
Yeah.
once you get into your regular job, you just kind of you get up. I mean, we would do PT 3 times, Monday, Wednesday, and Friday. And then after PT, you get in the shower, get breakfast, and go to work. But then on Tuesdays and Thursdays, you would just get up and go straight to work, and you had a job. It wasn't. It didn't feel as regimented as it looks like in the movies. It really didn't. You just have a job that you have to wear this uniform for.
Hmm.
Yeah.
That's kind of cool, though.
Yeah, I mean that's cool. And when I was at Fort Gordon, when I was in Germany, that was a little bit different because we were in a deployment unit, and so out of nowhere we would go to the field, and a lot of times we didn't know that we were going. It would just be like out of nowhere, 2 o'clock in the morning, they're banging on doors that it's time to go.
And I mean, like when going out into the field, like in the '90s, early '90s, there wasn't much going on in Europe, right? Like, I guess the Berlin Wall had already fallen.
Yeah.
So I mean, where were you guys going? Like, were you guys just going out on patrol? Like,
No, we there's training areas there. There's Hohenfels,
oh,
which is eastern part of Germany going towards Czechoslovakia. You also have um uh Bilsec. There's a few other places, what they call them, USATCs, US Army Training Centers. And you would go there, or sometimes you would just be out in the woods somewhere.
mm,
And then we would have what's called Reforger. Reforger is Return of Forces to Germany. And that's when, a lot of the units come over to Germany, and we do all these exercises and stuff and beat the heck out of the country and leave. And the Germans loved that because they made so much money off of us.
I bet.
I mean, we knocked down one tree and they're just, they're ready to retire.
Absolutely.
Because the government, US government, paid for everything it broke.
I believe that.
And then some. Yeah.
I believe that for sure.
Yeah.
But again, what was this transition like out of the military? Like, I mean, like how much notice did you have before you were going to leave? And then when did you start looking for work, and how did that kind of play out?
Yeah. So when I transitioned out and I packed everything up in my truck and drove back to Maryland from Augusta, Georgia, excuse me, it was weird. I was ready to get out, but I also didn't have a plan.
Yeah.
So I got home, and I stayed in my parents' basement because they had already done stuff with my room. And
Turn that into an office.
yeah, 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 and so and my father tried to make sure that I wasn't too comfortable in the house.
Hmm.
He said, we got kind of used to you not being here, you know. So,
So stay as long as you want, but
yeah.
yeah.
So no, they he tried to make sure that I wasn't trying to stay for long, which I really wouldn't have wanted to anyway.
Yeah.
But yeah, it was tough. It was tough, but I had done a lot of communications work, excuse me, when I was down at Fort Gordon, working out of the Dial Central office, which was just a main telephone hub for the Fort Gordon. And so I messed around, did different jobs and stuff, even sold cars for a little bit. And then my best friend, who I actually met in Germany, he helped me get into Bell Atlantic, where he was working. So I went to Bell Atlantic, and around this time I had gotten married to my high school sweetheart, and we had, I think, our first child by then. And so I was at Bell Atlantic and climbing poles and all of that happy stuff.
And did working like what was your job in the army with signals intelligence? Like, are you able to kind of explain to me what that was?
Let me see, how can I explain it.
Because for from the outside looking in, it's quite confusing.
So yeah, I'm trying to figure out what I actually can say. But what it is that you have targets. You have um you have other militaries or other governments that you're looking at, and as a SIGINT analyst, you're bringing in all the different types of signals intelligence, because even back then they were still doing Morse. So we still had Morse code intercept.
Oh,
And
wow.
then you had, your regular voice intercept. And so it was really bringing the different signals together and trying to synthesize all of that.
So just trying to understand what everyone else out there is doing.
Yeah. But you're when you're in a strategic assignment, you're doing it at at a fairly low level. You have a small targeted group that you're looking at, whereas if you're strategic, you can look at it from a much broader area.
Hmm.
So,
And I mean, like, how does this compare with like what the NSA does?
um,
Because like my understanding, and this is only from like people who have leaked stuff like Edward Snowden and things like that, like where the NSA might have a massively broad mandate and be trying to collect information from a lot of different people, whereas maybe in the military it was more like strategic, focused on specific missions or something like that.
yeah, Edward Snowden is still a sore subject for me. I think of Edward Snowden a lot different from a lot of people do.
Yeah.
I do think that he belongs in prison somewhere for the rest of his life. But um, NSA is strategic intelligence.
Mhm.
So they are really looking broadly at things where, in your military units, your tactical units, you are looking at just small units or small areas.
Mhm.
So it's different in terms of scope and in terms of scale.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Interesting. So did that mean that like when you came out of the military, like working for a Fortune 500 telecommunications company would have been like an easy transition?
Um,
Like I'm just trying to figure out like how Bell Atlantic figures into all of this.
yeah. So when during my last year over in at Fort Gordon,
Yeah.
I started working out of the Dow Central office, and so I was doing actual telephone work. And because my unit had moved down there from partially from Van Hill Farms, Virginia, and another part from Fort Monmouth, so this unit was brand new at Fort Gordon. Myself and my supervisor did all the phone lines. We started doing all the what we called local area networks back then. In the beginning of local area networks and stuff like that.
Yeah.
And so when I interviewed at Bell Atlantic, I could explain to them, the color codes for the wires and all those different types of things, and explain. I knew enough that that they wanted to bring me in.
Amazing. Interesting. And how long did that work last for?
So I was at Bell Atlantic for a couple of years, and yeah, I didn't enjoy the job just being a pole climber and installation and maintenance technician. So this is where if someone's phone was out, you're going out to their house and you're trying to troubleshoot. It was
Did
okay.
it get you over your fear of heights, climbing the poles?
It wasn't up high enough. It really wasn't. You know,
Yeah.
the poles weren't up high enough. And a lot of the areas now also have buried wires, so you don't have to worry about doing a lot of pole climbing or gaffing, as they say. But yeah, so it was cool, but it just wasn't something I enjoyed, and it didn't pay well at all. And so
Oh, for two.
yeah. So my best friend again, he worked in the central one of the central offices for Bell Atlantic, so he wasn't climbing poles and stuff like that. And he went from there to a small company called Metro Fiber Systems. And Metro Fiber Systems was one of the 30 some odd companies that ended up being a part of WorldCom.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. So, so when he got in, he helped me get a job there. And I, it was like a $6 an hour raise going from one to the other.
Hmm.
And so I was like, yes, absolutely. Let me get out of here. And learning fiber optics was one of the things that I really wanted to learn. I wanted to get away from the copper and the just regular dial tone stuff and get into fiber optics. And so Metro Fiber Systems, then WorldCom, they had just become WorldCom, was part of that.
Yeah, part of the internet revolution.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. And that was an exciting time
Yeah.
because we couldn't put up fiber fast enough.
This would have been like late 90s?
Mid to late 90s.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, you're looking at from 98, going on, and it was just yeah, it was crazy.
That was so funny because like from like 95, I think, when I got my first email address
Mhm.
to like 2005, I think, when YouTube started, maybe 2007 YouTube. So, but like it was like a decade where it went from like taking 10 minutes to dial up and get your email
Yeah.
to watching videos online.
Yeah, I mean, that was because of bandwidth. I mean, you just didn't have the bandwidth.
Mm,
Most internet back then, was dial-up.
mm,
Or you had ISDN, which was a little bit faster,
mhm.
but still wasn't that fast.
Now we're all getting it from space.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, now it's just screaming fast, but we couldn't put up fiber quick enough.
Mhm.
I remember I installed some of the first circuits for UUNet, which, for any internet nerds out there don't know who UUNet was one of the main internet companies. And you know um uh when AOL was pretty young, I was installing circuits at their Chantilly, Virginia headquarters, and that was when I first got to see people skateboarding around the offices. And I was like, what the heck is this?
Silicon Valley culture everywhere.
It's a professional workplace, but it was just, yeah, it was interesting.
Mm.
And so learning fiber optic, and I just became obsessed with fiber optic communications, and I fell in love with it. Just loved it.
And were you still with WorldCom when they collapsed?
No, no, I was with WorldCom for less than a year,
No.
and I was there during Y2K. Well, no, I was there. No, I was there just before Y2K. We were preparing for Y2K then, and then I got hired over at AT&T in Baltimore, and I was there for Y2K and all the rest of that stuff. And
Just in case there's any young listeners out there, Y2K was when 1999 became 2000, and everyone thought that the digital communications of the world would all stop
yes,
because the internet was not ready for the changing of the years from the last two digits going from 99 to being 00 again.
and it was pretty crazy. They gave us satellite phones and stuff like that.
Yeah.
It was just, yeah, it was crazy. And then we were actually in our central office, when the ball dropped,
No.
and we're like, okay, nothing happening.
I remember waking up when, like, I think we had a basketball tournament. I think I was abroad. Like, I think I was somewhere traveling. And I remember going to bed one night, like December 31st, 1999. And then we had a game that day, I think, because I was in college. And then waking up the next morning, we had to fly out. And I remember waking up, looking over at the alarm clock, going to my laptop, going online and being like, okay, looks like the world's okay. And it's like, time to carry on. Because I was like a 6 month buildup of just like fear for no reason.
And we loved it because we got so much overtime, and
I
and
bet.
we made so much money during that era and overtime and everything. It was unreal. It was unreal. I loved it. And and then working for AT&T, I was a part of one of the first long haul circuits going from DC to LA. I was on the DC end, and we were doing a relatively new technology called dense wavelength division multiplexer. So we're splitting the signal within the fiber. And so doing that, going coast to coast, it was huge, and then from there I went to and a lot of this was because of my best friend. I haven't called him my best friend in years. He's just like a brother to me now. But he helped me get into a company called Cable and Wireless.
Hmm.
Cable, the British company,
Huge.
but Cable and Wireless was huge in America back then.
Hmm.
Not anymore, but they were huge in America. And so we were the he and I were the transport tier 3 for Cable and Wireless. And so if no one could fix the circuits, then we had to fix it. So I was on call like crazy, and if I couldn't walk them through how to fix it, then I had to fly out there and fix it.
So you were like building the backbone of the American internet infrastructure
I was a part of it. Yeah, I was a part of it.
during the time when it went absolutely insane.
I was a part of it. It was exciting.
Yeah.
It was exciting. I was at Cable and Wireless during 9/11.
Mm.
And in fact, I just before the plane hit the Pentagon. Well, actually, a couple hours after the plane hit the Pentagon, I was actually driving past the Pentagon
Oh shit.
because that was my way to work.
Yeah.
I lived in Maryland, and Cable and Wireless was in Virginia, so I drove past it, and yeah, it was weird, but we worked like crazy back then. Unfortunately, when I was at Cable and Wireless, I was a salaried employee, so working didn't really give me any extra money. I just extra work.
Wow. So how did you parlay all of that experience into working now in cybersecurity?
So so around 2004, telecom just busted. It just so what happened was we their companies started to create systems that they thought could do what humans could do.
Hmm.
And so
That doesn't sound at all familiar to where we are now.
exactly, exactly.
It's
And and
happening again.
and even though those systems weren't as good at it, it didn't matter because companies realized their largest capital expenditure is people. So if you can get rid of a few people, even if your level of service degrades a bit, you're willing to live with it. And so around 2004, we went from being, you know, the hot commodity everybody wanted us to then nobody wanted us.
Oh wow.
It just like that. All of a sudden, nobody wants you. And at that time, I had gone to work for Verizon, and me and my best friend and two other guys, we provisioned Verizon's first nationwide network at the time before they bought MCI.
Hmm.
And so, but around that time, I was getting to a point where I was starting to lose the love for telecom. I wasn't having fun anymore, wasn't enjoying it anymore. And then I went to one last company, Sienna. And during that time, I was also going through a divorce, and I just didn't enjoy it. I really didn't enjoy it. And so I didn't know what to do. I just knew I didn't want to be in telecom anymore. And my fiance, it's our girlfriend slash then became my fiance, and then eventually my wife, her brother was already in cybersecurity, and he talked to me about it, and I was just like, okay, that's what I want to do.
Do you think you could see the writing on the wall when it came to the telecoms industry? Like you could see things were shifting, and you weren't exactly being treated as well, and you weren't the money wasn't there, and
Yeah,
things were kind of on the decline.
yeah, and i- there was no way not to see it. Yeah, it was in your face that like one day you're the greatest person in the world, and then the next day you're just garbage.
Yeah.
It felt that quick.
Wow.
So there were a lot of layoffs, there was a lot of things going on, and I just said, well, I don't even really want to do this anymore. I want to do something else. And so once I got introduced to cybersecurity, which would have been 2007, I fell in love with it like I did telecom.
Mm.
And because I'm a nerd by nature, I dive in, and I just live it.
So for people out there who don't know, like, can you kind of let us know a little bit about what cybersecurity is and what kind of jobs you had during that time?
So cybersecurity is an extremely broad field. There are so many jobs. Some of them are highly technical. Some of them are more management, policy, compliance. But it's a very broad field. But ultimately, what you're trying to do is protect sensitive information and systems. That's ultimately what you want to do. So but how you do that, like I said, can become uber technical, or it can be on the policy side. It can, so it
Mm.
just depends.
And where did you find a home in that kind of broad field?
I did a little bit of both because so I got a job working at the Defense Information Systems Agency, which is an agency in the Department of Defense, well, now Department of War. But we were basically the internet service provider for the Department of Defense at the time.
Oh my god, that's a huge job.
Yeah, and so
Did being a former military man yourself help you get that kind of
it
like
did.
yeah.
It did. And it helped me understand a lot of things, but what was the way I was able to slide in to cyber was I was the tier 3 at the time for the global information grid, which was the network for the Department of Defense for the fiber optic side.
Mhm.
Myself and a friend of mine were the tier 3. So we were the ones that had to fix the things that no one else could fix. But because of that, some of the cybersecurity people would call me into meetings and ask me questions about the way the signaling is and about how, if certain things could be vulnerable to attack and all those different types of things.
So just for the layman out there who doesn't know anything, and I'm one of them. So basically the US military runs their own internet service. Like they're not connected to the same internet that the rest of us are. Is that correct? And
Well,
that's kind of what you were helping to keep safe?
so they are in some ways connected to the internet, but in the Department of Defense you have IEPs or internet access points, and those are the entryways and the exit points from the what used to be called the global information grid, and then became the Defense Information Systems Network, and now it's they call it the DODN, or the DoD Information Network.
Mhm.
So DoD's network to the internet. Now it's not the only way to get to the internet, but it's the main way is through DISAs.
And to have those highly controlled access points means that you can essentially identify and stop threats. Is that
That's
does
the
that make
goal.
sense? Yeah.
That's the goal.
Okay.
Yeah. And so as they started calling me into more meetings, to ask me questions about um what we would call layer 1 communications, or the fiber optic communications, I started just kind of asking them questions. So it's like, you got a question for me, I got a question for you. And I started learning more about what they did in cyber. And so there was an opening in one of the organizations, and I was still a contractor at the time, but they gave me that opening because of my experience. And of course, also because I really wanted to get into it. So,
Mm. That's amazing.
yeah.
That's a hell of a transition.
Yeah, it was.
And then how long did you do that for?
I was at that organization for maybe another year or so. I mean, I stayed at DISA all I was at DISA for 12 years, but I was in different parts of the agency.
Mhm.
But I was there for 12 years,
Wow. Keeping the US military communications online and safe.
trying to. That was the idea. Um,
Do you get a lot of, like, attacks? Like, like the way, like, a bank or a Fortune 500 company might get, like, attacked and have their information held for ransom? Like, that's a pretty common thing these days. Does that happen to the DoD or the Department of War?
attacks happen everywhere.
Yeah.
I mean, there's an old joke in cyber that there's two kind of organizations: those who've been breached and those who don't realize they've been breached.
But everyone's being attacked.
Everybody gets breached. There's no way to not get breached.
Mhm.
What you want to do is you want to make it as hard as possible to be breached, and then you want to minimize the dwell time of them being in your network once they get in.
That's crazy because, like, you think about it, like, let's say, for example, hypothetically, and I don't know what the real number is, you might not, but let's say there's, like, 1,000,000 people working for the Department of War, Department of Defense, formerly, and you gotta think, like, on any given day, they're getting at least 1 or 2 phishing emails each, like, "Click this link to claim a prize," or "Click this link to get the best insurance deal for your new car," and then it ends up, taking access to their computer. It's the same shit we all have to deal with out here in the real world.
Yeah.
But I mean, like, but having to be responsible for 1,000,000 people not clicking stupid links must be mind-numbingly difficult.
Well, I mean, and there's systems that we have in place that can help to make that a little bit easier on the user. When emails come in, one of the first things they do is they kill any hyperlink. And so if you want to, you have to copy and paste that into the internet, and then you can actually see what you're looking at, because from a hyperlink you don't know where that thing is going.
No, it can go anywhere.
Yeah, and
Mm.
so yeah, I mean there's systems to help it, but yeah, if someone is, either determined to do the wrong thing or just not paying attention at all, yes, things can still happen.
I bet, yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, and did you like that job? Did you like kind of going back into a military environment for the first time?
I loved it.
Yeah.
Yeah, I enjoyed it. That was one of the agencies that I had wanted to work for years, and so I was happy to get over there. Now they're not the only way into the Department of Defense, but they're the main way into the DoD. But yeah, I enjoyed it, and I wanted to. Initially I went in as a contractor and figured I would stay a contractor forever, but then I realized I wanted to see if I could actually make change and actually, affect the way things went on. So, my boss helped me get into the government, and so I stayed in the government for a actually until I moved out here to LA.
Mhm.
And I had some tough times, but I mean, I wouldn't give it up for anything.
Wow. What was it like going from being a contractor to going back to being a government, employee? Was there any difference? Because people always talk about military contractors and like we hear about these stories of like Blackwater and guys in the field that aren't soldiers but they're contractors, but we don't necessarily understand like there's contractors at every level of government, especially
Yes.
doing tech stuff, right? Like
Yes.
so, but I'm just curious, like what's the difference between being a signals intelligence, cybercrime contractor versus being working for the government and doing the exact same job, basically.
So for me, there wasn't a huge difference because, even though I was there as a contractor, I I kind of I felt ownership over what I did. Some people as contractors is just, I'm a contractor, this is what I do. I do my job and then I go home.
Mm.
But because I enjoyed what I did, and I do actually care about the Department of Defense. So I treated it differently even as a contractor. So when I went government, not a whole lot changed for me
Mhm.
because I was kind of already in that mindset. The only difference is I was invited to meetings that I wouldn't have been able to go to before.
Right.
And I was able to make decisions as opposed to only advise.
Mm. Well, that must have been nice.
It was.
Yeah.
It has it has its trade-offs, but I wouldn't give it up.
And after 12 years and you came out here, I mean, what's life been like in sunny California since you left the Department of War?
It's been great. It's
Yeah.
been great. I mean, the reason why I initially made the move was in 2017. A good friend of mine, when I was telling you that when I first got to this, I was the tier 3 for the fiber optic network. A good friend of mine was my partner. So it was just the two of us doing it all. And then we moved into different organizations, but we kind of kept in touch. Well, in 2017, he committed suicide.
Oh shit, I'm sorry.
And it just really made me question all of my life choices, because here you had one of the smartest people I've ever known, one of the hardest working people I've ever known. And all he did, I mean, he just worked. The guy loved to work. The guy didn't own a TV.
Hmm.
He was kind of a country guy from Virginia, actually physically built his own house.
Oh wow.
That's what he did. I mean, you couldn't talk to him about TV shows. He's like, I don't know anything about that stuff. But he was always out there moving and doing something.
Sounds like a really healthy lifestyle.
It was.
Yeah.
It was to a degree, but it's a healthy lifestyle as long as your body will let you do it.
Mm.
And for him, he had some real bad physical ailments that started to get more and more painful and more debilitating. And he would go to his bosses at DISA and say, "Look, I can't do as much right now? Can I, offload some of this stuff?" And they'll pretty much say, "No, you need to get it done." And he wasn't the type to just not do it, so he would just power through everything. And I would see him some days in the hallway. I could just tell he was just getting more and more depressed.
Mm.
And apparently, one day he was sitting around with his wife on a weekend, and he said, "I'm sorry, I can't do this anymore." And he walked out into the backyard and shot himself in the head.
Jesus, that's awful.
Yeah. And so at that point, I was just, I was like, "What am I doing?" Because I was pretty much a workaholic as well.
Hmm.
And I was like, "I don't want to live this way."
Mm.
And not only that, but I had been to a lot of retirement ceremonies. And then within 2 or 3 years, you're going to their funerals,
Yeah.
and it's just like, there's got to be more to life than just working, and you're in an area that DC area, the culture is about being busy.
Right.
You got to be busy, and you brag about how busy you are.
I think people do that everywhere, right?
And, yeah, and I don't get it. It gets on my nerves when I hear people just brag about how busy they are. I mean, if you are busy, that's fine, but you're happy about it. It's like I don't get that part. Because what happens when you can't do those things,
Yeah.
and
Then
what do
life
you do?
gets real slow.
Yeah, and so I guess a lot of people probably learned that during COVID.
Yeah.
When they couldn't do all the things they wanted to do. But yeah, so when that happened to him, I just started questioning everything. And I'd come out here before. I'd done some speaking engagements out in California, and I was just like, "Man, this place is cool." And
No winters, baby.
and yeah, and relaxed and everything. And yeah, at some point I said, I'm out of here.
Mm.
You know, so.
And I mean, obviously, you don't have the same work that you did back east. But what do you do? What keeps you busy out here in Los Angeles?
So I went from being in the government to now being a consultant.
Hmm.
And so, for a long time there, I was consulting with some of the organizations that I was in charge of when I was in government. And so right now, what I do is I consult with companies, with major cybersecurity and IT companies that want to do business with the federal government, especially with the Department of War. Now I got to get used to saying that,
Hmm.
but and trying to help them understand the difference between commercial cybersecurity and government cybersecurity, because there are differences.
What are the differences? Just to I mean, I don't know what they are. I mean, like, what's the? Walk me through that.
Well, I mean, a lot of it has to do with risk.
Uh huh.
So you analyze risk a little bit differently when you're, especially in a a military organization, because you realize when you get breached, I mean, you lives can be lost from that. And so there's a little bit more passion towards making sure that you can be as secure as you can possibly be. Um, and so the amount of risk that you're willing to take is different from where it is with a company where you may lose your intellectual property, but people aren't going to die.
Yeah, a stock ticker going down for a day or two versus potentially military personnel being identified and killed abroad or something like that.
Or military personnel out there that can't communicate.
Right.
They're like stuck in the middle of nowhere, so it makes you think differently about risk. So that's one of the major differences. But then trying to help people understand how to do that, and then introducing them to the right people in the government that they can do business with and stuff like that. So
So if you are a private company dealing with the Department of War, I guess you would have to have a higher cybersecurity standard than a company that's not dealing with the government. Would that be something that you could say?
so that's an interesting that you brought that up, because there's a standard that came out a few years ago called CMMC. It's a cyber maturity model certification. And what was happening was, and this happened a lot when I was in government, was we were really doing a good job of becoming more and more secure. However, we were still plugged into these major contractors, and they weren't secure.
Right. That makes sense. Yeah.
So if you're the adversary, you're saying, well, I don't need to attack DOD. I can go after one of the major contractors. It's kind of like instead of going after a hospital, you go after the doctor's office that's connected to the hospital.
Hmm.
You know,
Yeah.
you go after the easy stuff. And for a long time, some of these major contractors were low hanging fruit.
Mm-hmm.
And so they came up with this CMMC to say, hey, you guys have to do better with our information.
Mm-hmm.
And so now you have to go through certain levels, was one, two, and three, depending on the type of information you have. And so you got to get certified for that. And I help companies with assessments to get them ready for that as well.
That's interesting. So people like yourself who would have worked for the department back in the day, all of a sudden, this is great because now you get to work as a consultant trying to get all these private companies up to speed.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, and on stuff that they really should have been doing anyway, and they should know better, but yeah.
Yeah. Well, no one does anything until they're forced to.
Yeah. Yeah, that's the unfortunate reality. It's all about incentives, and if you're gonna keep giving them all this money and not expecting security, then, that's what you're gonna get.
Right. Yeah. Well, it's a really interesting position to be in because I think, like you said, like nowadays, it's like, you're either an entity that's been hacked or that you didn't know you were hacked. And it's
Yeah,
just like,
I mean, because everybody gets breached,
yeah.
and so when people talk about, "I wanna be secure," it's like, that's not a thing.
Mhm.
I mean, it's really not. I mean, you wanna be as secure as you can possibly be. You wanna be reasonably secure, but to sit around and say, "Well, this company is secure,"
Mhm.
I worry about any company who would say that because they just don't know that they've been breached.
Yeah, it's crazy. Like I've been, again, I'm an outsider looking in, right? So the only way that I ever get access to the world that you've lived in is by watching fucking movies and TV. And right now I'm watching this show called Tehran on Apple,
Yeah.
and it's amazing. And I've been listening to some commentary about the show and about how they say like actually all of this stuff that they do in the show is actually stuff they can really do now. So like for like the Israeli Mossad people, department of like the Mossad in Israel, the Secret Service, they can actually like, they had agents in Iran that were working and they could turn on and off like any phone, any microphone that was connected to a phone or computer, any camera, like in like a minute's notice. And I'm just like, there's no way to defend against that. Like
Yeah.
that is like, that's just everyone everywhere all the time. And that's like crazy.
Yeah.
Makes me want to go back to like a Motorola flip phone. I tell you, we're all gonna be on flip phones again someday with no cameras, no GPS, no navigation.
I will be the last of those people, but I still love technology.
Yeah.
I think technology still ultimately makes us safer. I think, you know, people look at the downsides of technology and totally miss the upsides.
Yeah.
Just totally miss it.
Well, I mean, instantaneous communication, getting a chance to speak so freely, like so often. Like, I mean, I love it because like I can wake up in the morning and because I work globally, I can wake up in the morning and have 10 messages from people I work with in Asia or Europe, and then they've all sent me these long voice notes. And it's like we had phone calls in the middle of the night while I was sleeping, and you can just listen, pick them up, send them back. And it's instantaneous communication. And the way we've built these services around the world is pretty
And it's at no
spectacular.
additional cost. I would imagine as long as you spent over in China,
Yeah.
that you probably made phone calls back around this way and how expensive those phone calls used to be.
Yeah, actually, Skype was a big introduction to me for me back in the day. I think that came out in like 2001 or 2 or 3 or something like that. And you put $10 on it and then you can call another line from another part of the world. And that was like a really cheap way of getting around it. I remember this. I remember my first trip to China was in 2001 and I did a 90-day trip all around China by train and bus, and it was spectacular. But in order to make a long distance phone call, and because this I didn't have a laptop at this stage, I didn't have a mobile phone. So you had to use their payphones.
Yeah.
But in order to make a long distance payphone, you needed to buy a special like credit card.
Yeah.
And that you had to slide it in,
Yep.
and it would give you like 10 minutes of international calls.
Yeah.
And I remember I would put the thing in, dial the special code, dial the number, and then it'd be like, you have 5 minutes. And I'd be like, hey, Dad, I'm alive. I'm doing great. Okay, bye. And then I'd be like, okay, call the mom. It's like, hey, Mom, everything's great. And you were on the clock right away. And
Yeah.
I remember that like it was yesterday. It was hilarious. I kept all those little cards too from all that trip. That was fun.
Yeah.
But I mean, like, you think about where we've come from there. That was just like 25 years ago.
Yeah. And I remember when you didn't have, I mean, even with the bandwidth that they would give you, you didn't have, there were still limits,
Yeah.
of how much you could use and all of that kind of stuff. I mean, I don't know. I kind of, I, it's hard for me to deal with when people just talk about how bad the technology is and don't realize how life-saving the technology is. They were never, they never had their car break down on the side of the road, and they had to walk, and they would see a house somewhere, and it's like, I gotta knock on their door, and hopefully they'll let me use their phone so that I can call for a tow truck,
Mm-hmm.
you know? Because there's no cell phones, there's nothing else you can do, you know? I remember those days.
Yeah.
Now you've got your cell phone, and nowadays, even if you don't have signal, if you've got an iPhone, you can still text out.
Yeah, that's true.
You know?
Emergency. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, it's so much better.
Mm-hmm.
But yes, there are trade-offs. There are certain things that have gotten worse, but the lifespan right now is not only longer, but better
Mm-hmm.
than it's ever been.
And how do you feel working at the forefront of all of this? Like, do you feel like it's moving faster now than it ever has before, and it's more difficult now than it ever has before to stay safe and to avoid these breaches, or at least to be ready for them?
Well, I mean, the vulnerabilities are, a lot of them are fairly old, but there's just new ways of exploiting them, and a lot of it is, too many companies just do enough to patch that one hole.
Mm-hmm.
And so the other six holes, you haven't seen anything come through it yet. So you just kind of will wait.
Mm-hmm.
But, yeah, but with technology, the more technical we get, yes, the complexity is inherently insecure.
Yeah, it's interesting. Like, the way I look at it is, I've got for example, I've got an iPhone, right? And I've got a bunch of apps, on the thing, and then you've got your Apple ISO software on the phone. And I have this, like, because I've been thinking about this stuff a lot, and especially in the lead up to this conversation. And every day or two, you have to update a bunch of apps through the App Store. Maybe once a month or once a quarter, you have to update the iOS. And every time one of those updates come through, I was like, oh, someone got hacked. Because, like, someone got hacked, probably lost some data, lost some valuable information, lost some IP. And then they come out with a patch to fix whatever, was that hack. And
Well, that's some of it,
yeah.
but some of it is also because iOS, Android, the major operating systems are so complex, and they're constantly adding more capabilities,
Mm-hmm.
that things just tend to fall apart,
Mm.
because the more complex your operating system is, the more ways it can fail. And so a lot of those patches are to fix things. They're like, oh, I didn't realize I forgot to do that,
Mm-hmm.
you know. And so, yeah, and with iOS, because Apple has been under so much pressure to get closer to Android and a lot of Android's capabilities, they've probably put themselves in a bit of a predicament that they weren't ready for. Because, yeah, I mean, my iPhone still has just some of the weirdest, quirkiest things going on.
Few glitches there.
Yeah, yeah, things that I used to remember when I was on Android.
Yeah.
You know?
That's wild. So if I was so let's say I was like a company based in Los Angeles, and I was doing work with the Department of War, and I was communicating with their people every day, or, and I was selling them some products or some services. Like, how much money and how long would it take for me to have to upgrade what I do to be able to be safe enough to work with a government entity like the Department of War? Like, are we talking millions of dollars, or is it just a couple hundred grand, or is it just switching from Gmail to, something more secure? Is there anything more secure than G? Like, I'm curious, like, what does that process even look like?
So the interesting thing is, and this isn't sexy at all, but the some of the best ways to secure an organization don't cost a penny.
Really?
Don't cost a penny.
Just awareness,
Culture,
culture.
culture. You know, creating policies and practices. I know companies. I was used to getting into this system this way, and now you're making me do it a different way, and I don't want to do it this way, and so I'm gonna keep fighting back because I want to keep going in the easy way. And the problem is that easy way a lot of times can set you up for a whole lot of problems.
Mhm.
And so having a mature culture in your company and for in terms of security, and that's something that doesn't cost you anything.
Mm.
That's training, that's policies, that's doing the basics. That's one of the things I'm a big fan of. If you look at anyone who's great at anything, one of the things they had to master was the basics. It's and so cybersecurity, um, the difference with cybersecurity is that if you don't do the basics, it doesn't matter how much money you spend.
Mm.
You could spend all the millions and billions of dollars on security and it won't make a difference.
Right.
You have to have the policies, you have to have the procedures, you have to have the culture, or it just really doesn't matter
Yeah.
how much money you spend. And so, with a lot of the companies that I work with, I just go into their culture. I go into their policies. For instance, um, insider threat. You know, I ask them. If you find that one of your employees is stealing your sensitive files and selling them to the company across the street, what are you going to do?
Mhm.
Oh, we're going to fire him. Okay, and then he'll own you next week.
Mhm.
Where's the policy saying that they can't do it?
Yeah.
Where's the training? Where's the policy saying that they can't do it? If you haven't done that, then what are you doing?
Mm.
And so just little things like that of protecting yourself from a legal perspective, from a cultural perspective, those are the main things that I advise companies to do before they spend a penny.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, that's like, that is really rebuilding the entire culture from the ground up.
Yeah,
Yeah. Do you miss being inside the government?
not really.
No.
Not really. I mean,
Is it just the weather, or is it something more?
no, I mean, there have been things that have happened in the news where I wonder what really happened, you know? And
That's me every day.
yeah, and I'm not there anymore, so I can't see certain things, but yeah, so during those times, it would be cool to kind of be still involved, but for the most part, no, I'm glad I did it, but I wouldn't wanna do it again,
Yeah.
but I am happy I did it.
Yeah, that's wild. I mean, what an experience.
Yeah.
I mean, to go through your military service and then to come out and then be able to spend 10, 12 years back with the Department of War, working in cybersecurity and communications would have been an interesting ride.
Yeah, I mean, it's been great.
Hmm.
It's been great, and but one of the things is I have the ability to pivot,
Mhm.
if something that I'm working on, nobody cares about anymore, then I can move on to something else. And that's where a lot of people get hurt is that they're stuck in what they've been doing forever.
Mhm.
And when times change, they don't know what to do. And they are afraid to change with it. And that's where AI is really gonna hurt a lot of white collar jobs.
Yeah, I feel like the next 24 months are going to be a big gut check for a lot of people in the United States and around the world.
Yeah, because I mean the whole thing is AI, what people don't realize, AI gives you the ability to really do more, to make more money, to enhance your life. But if you're stuck in what you were doing prior to the last 5 or 6 years, especially if you're in one of those jobs like a researcher or something like that.
Mhm.
Yeah, it's going to be tough for you.
It's interesting, I mean, maybe we kinda grew up in the same era, I'm guessing, and it's funny because you kinda go through high school and things like that, and you have, like, a guidance counselor, and they say, "Oh, what do you wanna do when you grow up?" and things like this, and, "I wanna do this, I wanna do that." And then you go to university, maybe, like, you went to the military, it's like, what kind of where do you wanna go in the army? Like, you've got some options here. And when I was in university, I was trying to figure out, like, what I wanna do. But at the end of the day, none of that shit matters. All you need to do is be fucking nimble and be ready to change directions
Yeah.
on a dime. Like,
Yes.
that's the only fucking skill that matters these days.
Yes.
What you wanna do or what you studied 20 years ago makes no difference.
It doesn't. It doesn't. It doesn't. And
That's crazy.
it doesn't. And that's one of the reasons why I love being in cybersecurity, because you can't be an expert in cybersecurity.
No, because it changes every day.
It's not even and so I've heard people say, "Well, I'm an expert in cyber," and okay, all right,
Yeah.
yeah, you're just setting yourself up for embarrassment, because you can't be. First off, it's too broad. That's first off, and second off, like you said, it changes
Mm.
constantly.
It's more like just
Yeah,
crisis management.
yeah, because the adversary isn't going anywhere,
Yeah.
and you have to be correct 100% of the time. They only gotta be right once.
Yeah.
That's all, so they're just constantly, you've got, some of these nation state actors, they're just sitting in a room somewhere, just throwing stuff up against the wall and see what sticks.
Yeah.
And they may be throwing stuff up against the wall for months, and then one thing sticks.
Mhm. And they have access to military records of God knows what
You
because they went through a supplier.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You just never know. And so yeah, that's one of the things I love about it, because I love change.
Mhm.
I love change, and so it works well for me.
Yeah. That's wild. I mean, your brain really has to be nimble for that kind of work and for maintaining that kind of mentality of everything's changing all the time and I need to just keep being ready to change with it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, you can't be stuck in any thought process.
Yeah.
Everything has to be, you have to be willing to get rid of any thought process when, evidence and superior arguments work against it,
Yeah.
you know?
That's wild, man. What a world.
Yeah,
I would
I love it.
yeah.
This is the greatest time to be alive. This
Yeah.
absolutely is, and it's not even close.
Mm.
It's not even close. And so we can talk about all the bad things, and I can come up with some bad things about social media and about, technology and everything, but it's a net positive,
Mhm.
absolutely a net positive.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I believe so too. It's just we just have to there's some of us out there that are less disciplined.
Yeah.
And I think that we just have to, help them along and make sure that they can get disciplined so that they're not spending 8 hours a day on social media or not making themselves vulnerable to these kinds of breaches and then infecting their whole company and things like that. Like,
Yeah.
it's just an educational process.
Yeah, and a lot of people, it is, they don't know.
Yeah.
I've been lucky in my life that I've been surrounded by so many great mentors and leaders that have helped me. And my success is largely because of the people that I surrounded myself with. And if people don't have access to those same types of people, then it is harder. That's just the reality.
You have to search out those people too,
Yeah,
because the
you do.
people that you surround yourself with eventually that reflects on you as to
Mhm.
how you think, how you develop, how you
Yes.
stay nimble. And
Yeah,
if you don't search out those extraordinary people, then
absolutely.
you're just gonna kind of fall behind.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, that is absolutely true. And that's the way I've raised my kids, is that you have to be willing to change when things happen, and you have to be able to go to people and walk up to them and say, "Hey, I'd like for you to mentor me." You have to actually ask the question.
I always like the saying that I can't remember one of the technology founders. I don't know if it was Steve Jobs or someone else, Probably wasn't Steve Jobs because he was pretty arrogant. But and this comment was someone said like, if you're the smartest guy in the room, you need to find another room.
Yeah, that was, I know if I remember, yeah, I remember that, but yeah,
Yeah.
but that it's absolutely true.
And this stagnation that you're kind of talking about of people not wanting to change, people not wanting to grow, people not wanting to develop, that reminds me of this mentality of it's like all these smart people in the room, they don't want to find another room. They're happy being the top dog in their little room,
Yes,
and you know, the biggest fish in the fishbowl,
yes,
and they don't want change and they don't want to grow and have to, you know, fight again or learn from other people again. And I think that's the mentality that we need to break if we're gonna all make this transition together, which is huge.
yeah, they quickly become irrelevant, and luckily because I lived through the telecom bust, I saw a lot of this stuff happening. Like for me, like cybersecurity is still a big deal. I give it a couple more years.
Mhm.
In a couple of years, us cyber guys are, we're gonna be like everybody else. We're not gonna be that special.
You think you'll just be able to type into an AI, please, you know, check my systems and make sure there's no threats, enter, and then it'll just do it in like 5 minutes?
You can do that now.
Yeah, right.
You can do that now.
Yeah.
Now the
The culture is the hard part
now
though.
now well now the output may not be as reliable.
Yeah.
So so but yeah, there's systems where you can pretty much do that now.
Mm.
Yeah.
But it's the people education, it's the culture, it's the building systems within the companies.
Yeah.
That's I think is gonna take much longer because I think that's
Yes.
the hard push.
Yeah. Because people feel threatened by it and they really shouldn't be.
Mm.
This is really going to free you from some of the more menial tasks to do some greater things.
Mhm.
Because a lot of the stuff that most of us hate doing anyway, a lot of the mindless stuff we hate doing anyway can already be done. So now you can concentrate on other things. And if people look at it that way, regardless of the field, then you can find a way to benefit with all of this.
I remember one of my first jobs in university, I worked in the financial industry at a consulting firm, and they would like rank banks and rank bankers and stuff like that. And I would do these data entries of these interviews that were done all the time. And I would do like 12 or 14 hours a day. I did this for a whole summer and I just did data entry. And I'm like, well, that job's fucking, I mean, that job was probably gone 5 years ago.
Well, it's longer than that. I mean, data entry has been gone for probably 15 years. I do remember those jobs that were just data entry. Yeah, those have probably been gone for probably, I'd say at least 15 years.
Yeah, that brings me back.
Yeah, yeah. But you've got to be willing to change, and luckily for me, I love to change, and so it's not that hard.
Yeah. I mean, you can't work in this industry if you're not ready to take on whatever the new challenge of the day is going to be.
Yeah,
Yeah.
but even just in life, you know, you as you see that certain thought processes no longer serve you, you've got to be willing to get rid of them. And that's one of the things that I've learned in my life, and so now I take joy in letting go of stuff that no longer serves me.
Yeah. That's powerful. So what else keeps you busy here in Los Angeles, if you don't mind me asking?
Well, other than work, I have my nonprofit Cyber Pathways, teaching young people cybersecurity. I do classes over Zoom. I'm working on, hopefully in the next year or so, being able to do some in-person classes with some high school kids.
Hmm.
That's what I ultimately want to do because I'm getting close to the end of my career. And so I want to be able to give away as much as I can and help them get into the industry and help them thrive. So that's Cyber Pathways. My wife and I have our podcast, Love, Growth, and Narratives, on YouTube and all the other places. And we enjoy that because my wife and I talk. We just talk all the time.
That's brave.
We talk about the world,
Yeah.
and you know, this was some years ago. My wife was saying, um, the reason why the extremes on the left and right are able to command the narrative is because more moderate people don't say anything.
Yeah. We kind of tune out.
Right.
Mm.
Because when you're moderate, you don't want to yell. I mean, it's like it's it doesn't
Yeah.
it doesn't make sense, to yell, "Hey, I think I'm right here.
Go figure, right? I love how the fact I love how the fact that somehow, like, if you were like a Clinton Democrat, now you're a fascist.
Yeah.
Because like I grew up, and I guess I became like politically aware, in my early teens, which I think is pretty common for most people. And Bill Clinton was the president of the United States, and I grew up in Canada, so he wasn't even my president, but I just grew up around that time, and I remember the policies, and we were talking about it in class all the time. And if you were a Clinton Democrat in the '90s, you're like you're like a racist fascist,
Yeah.
and it's just like and it's amazing how everything has moved, and I feel like I kinda just stayed the same. And a lot of us, like I said, like in the middle, we're just so confused by what's going on the extreme right and the extreme left. It doesn't even seem like we're all in the same universe anymore.
Yeah, and the major problem with that is if you're on one side, even if you're moderately on one side, you have a thought process about everyone on the other side.
Mhm.
And so what you do is you attribute the worst of what's on the right to everybody on the right, and the same thing with the left.
Mm.
So if I don't like the left, then I look at someone who's extreme left, and I'll say, well, this is everybody,
Mm.
and it's really not,
Mm.
because if you grab the average person, regardless to where they are voting wise, the amount of things you're gonna agree on are just huge compared to sometimes trivial things that you disagree on. And a lot of the disagreement is you're arguing different things. You're not even arguing the same thing.
Mhm.
And so that's where I get frustrated with both sides,
Yeah.
and I guess, and I'm usually like that. I don't like either side, either extreme.
No. It's very nice in the middle, just, trying to respect people for who they are, trying to be, socially liberal,
Yeah.
and maybe fiscally conservative, because, $35 trillion of debt probably isn't the best thing in the world.
Yeah. Well, a lot of that is, yeah, because of some liberal policies, but yeah, I mean, it's really about, I can give credit to the worst of presidents if they do something I like,
Mhm.
and I can be critical of someone who I really liked when they do something I don't,
Yeah.
and people can't do that.
Mhm.
It's like if you're in this camp, then everything that everyone in that camp does, you have to agree with.
It's funny. I feel also too like the media has a role in all of this as well, because obviously I'm a Canadian, and I was watching the Olympic hockey over the weekend, and the Canadians lost to the Americans 2-1 in overtime.
Mhm.
And the U.S. team was invited to the White House yesterday for the State of the Union address, right? So you had the entire American hockey team, all these happy kids with their gold medals and stuff like that. And all these media people were trying to trick them into saying, like, yeah, we're super excited to be at the White House. We love Trump, blah, 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 blah. And one of these kids, he's like 22 or 23 years old. He's just said, all I want to do is talk about sports. Our Whoever is in the office of the president, whichever human being sits in the office of the president and holds that title, is a hockey fan, and they want America to do well, and that's why we're here. So he just kind of like completely cut through all the
Yeah.
bullshit of this, like, media
Yeah.
is just goading people into trying to get a soundbite so that their piece of shit story can get more web hits, because they're going to have some bullshit title that gets people to click on it a little more. And I really feel like the media is exacerbating the difference between the left and the right, and
Yes.
it's worse here than anywhere else.
Well, yeah, I mean, for business purposes,
Yeah.
if you're a media organization on one side or the other, your ability to drive an even deeper wedge gets you more clicks.
Yeah.
It gets you more advertising. And so, yeah, but my problem is that people aren't looking beyond that.
Mm.
I was looking at this video the other day. I can't remember who did it, but they were talking about stupidity and how some of the smartest people in the world are stupid.
Mhm.
And what he said his definition of stupidity is is basically relinquishing independent thoughts to someone else.
Mhm.
And that to me just kind of crystallized it. That just seemed so perfect that you no longer think independently. It's like, oh, Ryan's my favorite YouTube guy. Ryan, what do you think about this? So I can think that way too.
Yeah.
And not even doing any level of your own investigation or research or anything.
Outsourcing the thinking.
Yes, outsourcing your whole thought process.
Uh,
That's exactly what people are doing right now,
Mhm.
and it frustrates me to no end.
How is the podcast with your wife when you talk about these kinds of topics? And like, I'm curious, like, because obviously your wife isn't just your podcast host,
Yes.
co-host. She also is someone who lives with you and has to live with you off camera as well as on camera.
Yeah.
So I'm curious, like, how obviously you guys try to take different sides of and debate and things like that. But how does that play out on camera and then also in your normal life?
Well, I mean, there are certain things that we still argue about. Um, with my wife, what she really gets on me about, and she's has legitimate reasons, is a lot of times not my thought process, but how I articulate it. And so trying to be more mindful of people who haven't done the research. Because I've been in the politics since I was probably about 5 years old. I still remember when Jimmy Carter was elected president because he was my governor in Georgia, and my older sister went to the same school as Amy Carter, and so you know, I remember when Ronald Reagan got elected, and let's see, that was what 80, so I would have been like 9.
Yeah.
And I was always keeping up with those things, but I'm kind of a quirky guy. That's what a little bit of autism does to you.
It's funny. It's funny you say that because I think men are like I think men have a really difficult time articulating in general because I think biologically and in our DNA, I think we're built to be men of action or human beings of action. We're trying to solve problems. We're trying to come to some kind of conclusion or solution to things, and we're not necessarily here to like talk about everything and build consensus.
I think there is I can agree with some of that, but I think some of it is also, men are raised to be a certain way and to not be considerate of others' feelings and things of that nature. And I think a lot of that's not exactly nature but nurture.
Mm,
I don't I've been very critical of how, boys are raised, and I've been critical about how I raised my older children because a lot of the things I did, I look at now, I was like, wow, that was a really bad idea.
that was just wrong.
It was just wrong.
Yeah.
And so now with my son, I'm still, and he's 17 now, but he's been able to see a lot of the evolution in the way I parent, you know, um, just some things that yeah, I was wrong.
It takes it. I think like I'm not a parent, so I don't know how to go about this, but it does take a long time to figure out parenting. Like it's not like
Well, I don't think you ever honestly figure it out. That's so I got to disagree with you there because, or maybe it's just me because I don't think I've actually really figured it out.
it just depends on like what part of the arc you're on, right? Like because it never finishes.
Yeah, and it was like when my youngest son was born. He and my older son are 10 years apart to the day. They actually share a birthday, and then my daughter is a year older than my oldest son. And so when my youngest son came around, people were like, "Oh, well, you already have 2 other kids. You know what you're doing."
Hmm.
No, because every kid is so different.
Yeah.
You can't use what you learned from this one on that one because they're so totally different.
Hmm.
They react differently. They want different things. They care about it's just it's so different. And so yeah, I don't think I'll ever know what I'm doing.
Yeah. And there's some beauty to that. Yeah. So one of the things we talked about off camera a couple months ago when we had lunch was shooting.
Mhm.
So during COVID, I got stuck because I couldn't climb mountains and film all around the world like I was used to, and I got really into target shooting
Mhm.
at a range in Dubai, and I really fell in love with target shooting because, like, as as a basketball player, it's all about like controlling your mind, controlling your breathing, like shooting foul shots, right? Like you're huffing, you're puffing, you've just got hit, you know, pick yourself up off the ground, and then you have to calm yourself right down and then hit a foul shot.
While everybody's looking at you and no one is coming at you.
Yeah.
It's just the spotlight is on you.
And because of that, I really fell in love with target shooting. So I had this like I would rent this big like sniper rifle, and I would just sit there, breathe, squeeze the trigger, and hitting shots like really quite far away.
Right.
And I really fell in love with it. And then I found out that it's also a passion of yours, but
Yeah.
you're actually training people.
Yeah. Yeah, I've been into to firearms for a while. Um, what got me even deeper was, my hip replacement. Because I realized that if trouble happened, I wouldn't even be able to run away from it.
Mhm.
I'm stuck.
Yeah.
And so
Better learn how to stay and fight.
exactly. So even though I was already into firearms, I got deeper and deeper into it. And then, as I got deeper into it, sometimes people would ask me, "Hey, can you teach me and take me to the range and all of that?" And so eventually I went and, went through the NRA process to get certified as an instructor and but even with that, I'm still learning,
Mhm.
because I've got a friend of mine who's an active police officer, and he trains police officers. And sometimes I feel like I halfway know what I'm doing. Then I train with him, and I'm like, okay, yeah, I got a lot to learn.
Yeah.
But I love that.
Mhm.
For me, I love when I get into situations where I realize there's still much more to learn because now I have more I can do.
Mhm.
If I
It's motivating.
Yeah, if I feel like I've got nothing left to learn, then I'm gonna go off and do something else. Yeah, you know. But yeah, with shooting, and then I ended up getting my wife into it, and so we're both concealed carriers. And my wife is, whew, she 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 will put probably a lot of LAPD officers to shame with how good she is.
Mhm.
And so I enjoy taking people for their first time to the range, teaching them about firearms and about, California law and stuff like that. And so, yeah, it's a lot of fun.
It is. I've always wanted to like do biathlon training where you do the cross country skiing and then you have to stop and shoot
Yeah.
and then you have to put the rifle by and then ski again.
Ooh,
I love the physical element of it, and then because I was an athlete for many years and I love climbing mountains and stuff like that, and then I love the mental aspect of like having to calm your whole nervous system down, and then make a shot and then fire it back up again and then go again. And I've always thought like I'm too old obviously to compete probably, but if I can find like some older men's.
well, you're not too old to compete. There's, there's a lot of organizations out there of competitive shooters,
Yeah.
and they're all ages. I mean, there's competitive shooters in their 70s. So yeah,
Did you see that guy from Turkey who won the shooting at the Olympics where
I didn't. I heard about, it, but I didn't see it.
so all these other people from all these other countries, like they have all these special glasses and they have the things that block out from the side, like the horses have when they race, and they have these things on their arms. So everyone had all the kit, right? And then this Turkish guy shows up in like blue jeans with nothing on, and he's just like, and he fucking won the Olympic gold medal.
That's crazy.
It was amazing. But, yeah, and then I was watching the biathlon, in the, Milan Cortina Olympics as well, and I was just like, "I wish I could try to find a way to do that." This looks like so much fun.
Well, I tell you, and I'm gonna get Scott out here one of these days.
Yeah.
I can't. He still argues with me at the gym about it, but
So he lived in China for too long. He just doesn't know because obviously firearms in China is a huge no-no. But I was really lucky that I found a shooting club in the UAE when I was kind of stuck there for a few years during COVID, where I was able to like really kind of learn. I wasn't able to like take the guns apart and clean them and stuff like that and like really understand how they work, but I really kind of got into a good rhythm of just shooting and managing my gun, and it's something I want to continue to learn.
yeah, and here you really have to pay attention to the laws
Mhm.
and when you should and when you shouldn't. And one of the things about what people don't understand about carrying a firearm, it actually makes you more passive.
Mhm.
Like before I started carrying, I had my issues with road rage and all the rest of that kind of stuff and getting mad and yelling at people, all that kind of stuff. Now, if somebody cuts me off, it's fine.
It's fine.
It's fine.
Yeah.
And I had a couple of guys cut me off the other day, and at the light they were yelling and screaming at me, and I was like, okay.
I was in a Waymo on Saturday. What was that? Like 4 or 5 days ago. I was in a Waymo on Saturday, and we were coming through across an intersection, and someone stopped and just started honking at my Waymo. And of course, the Waymo doesn't have a fucking driver.
Yeah.
So I'm just like, road rage in LA is fucking everywhere. And people don't even know why they're angry.
Yeah.
And they don't even, and they just start honking for no reason. Like, this is like, eventually all the fucking cars will be automated and there will be no drivers. And then everything will probably work really smoothly. But until that happens, you're going to have like 9 automated,
Yes.
robo taxis and then one driver who's still angry, honking at everyone for no reason.
Yeah. Yeah, and for me, and also I worry about my wife being out there because LA can get crazy, and so I just want us to protect ourselves.
Yeah.
That's it. And I'm not macho or anything. I'm way too old for that.
Mm-hmm.
I want to be able to live my life, and that's it.
Mm.
And a lot of people get really passionate when they find out that you're into guns, and it's just and they paint you with all these pictures of you just want to kill somebody. Like, that's the last thing I ever want to do. I train for a day that I hope never happens,
Yeah.
because I figure even if I ever had to pull and shoot someone, I would feel bad even if that's just the worst person in the world. I'm still gonna feel bad
Yeah.
because I have no interest in ever taking a life, but I have no interest in my life being taken. That's the whole thing, or my wife's life, or anybody who I care about.
Do you think that mentality goes back to, basic training back when you were like 18 about defending yourself? Or do you think that's something that's evolved since you've left the military?
It's evolved.
Yeah.
It's evolved, and the more I've learned about things, and what I worry about is honestly disparity of force. So I have family members who are totally against guns, and so sometimes when I post content of like yesterday, I was out at an outdoor range shooting. I posted some content, and I get family members that are upset about it, and I just wish we didn't have any guns. I don't wish that. I would never want a life where there's no guns,
Yeah.
because then what happens when that young lady is walking home one night and she gets approached by 5 guys who aren't armed,
Hmm.
but that's disparity of force. And so she shouldn't have a way to get home alive? I mean, is that what we care about more than this little piece of metal and polymer?
Yeah. It's like the argument of people who want to defund the police, right? It's like, well, if we don't have police, the strong will take from the weak, and that's just the way everything has always been.
I always thought that was just ridiculous.
Yeah.
you know, Defund the police, and I think it's the same thing with the abolish ICE. I think it's crazy. You know, Now there are a lot of things that ICE has been doing that I don't like, that I think is absolutely harmful.
Hmm.
But I would prefer change over abolishing them.
Some kind of reform or some kind of narrowed down or finely tuned mandate.
Well, but that's not the only thing that ICE does. I mean, in terms of going after human traffickers. So if you abolish ICE, then you're saying you don't want anybody going after human traffickers?
Hmm.
You're okay with that?
Hmm.
You're okay with not having customs enforcement, with anything being able to come into this country? Are you're really okay with that?
The thing that confuses me the most, and I'm completely apolitical and I'm Canadian, I don't even vote in the United States, and I tune out a lot of the politics, but I do like to read. And the thing that confuses me the most is if you go back in history over the last, say, 50 years, the two presidential terms where the most people were ever deported
Mhm.
from the United States was actually the Obama years.
Mhm.
And and I never saw anything in the news once about people being deported. Like, and he had like he was deporting like 10x of what's being deported now.
Yeah, but you also have to look at you're looking at something that happened over the course of 8 years as opposed to one.
Hmm.
You're also looking at a lot of deportations happening at ports of entry.
Yeah,
So it's totally different. But my problem with a lot of this is just the ambiguity of it all.
yeah.
Like when someone says defund the police, okay, let's walk through that. Let's honestly take a look at that.
A little thought experiment.
Same thing with abolish ICE. Okay, explain how that works in public policy.
Mm,
You know, you have to mature your arguments. What is it that you actually don't like? Well, I don't like what they did to that person. Was it illegal?
hmm.
Well, you don't know that because you haven't researched the law.
Hmm.
Now, if you telling me that you don't like what they did to this person and that there's a law that allowed it, and now you want to change that law to something else, well, now we got something to talk about because now we've got a level of specificity. Now we have something we can talk about. But just abolish ICE, I don't understand. And then they wonder why politicians don't pay any attention to them
Hmm.
because nobody knows what you want.
You know what I would like to see abolished?
What's that?
I would like to see it be a crime to be a protester who gets a salary. I would like to see people who fund protesters and people who receive money as protesters to be a criminal offense.
Well, I tell you, I honestly don't have an issue with any of that.
Well, because okay, as someone who's lived in China for 18 years,
Mhm,
where you don't have any rights,
mhm,
like, in the United States, you have freedom of speech, freedom of assembly, and freedom of press, right? Those are three things that allow you to say what you want, uh, congregate in a group that believes in something
mhm,
and to be able to talk about it, and then to be able to publish that. Okay, so those are three things that don't exist in most of the countries I've lived in for my whole life.
mhm.
So I grew up as an adult in China. I did 18 years. Then I lived in the Middle East. Obviously, there's not a lot of free speech there.
No.
So now I'm here in the United States and spending more time here. And I start to see how these rules are being abused. But these rules are so fundamental to and so fundamental to what it means to being a free human being in the Western hemisphere, Western civilization, and the way that they're being corrupted and bastardized by money. And this really bothers me because part of me thinks the freedom of speech is such a pure and beautiful thing, and to have it twisted by introducing money and perspective and points of view, like people are being paid to, for example, people are being paid to start riots anytime they see ICE vehicles around.
Mhm.
And whether you agree with ICE or not, protesting and being paid to protest and get in their way and throw shit at their vehicles and kick their vehicles and try to fight with them, that makes no sense at all.
It doesn't. What I would say is, um, I have no problem with protesting. I have no problem with people being paid to protest. It's when you're actually when you're actually getting in the way of law enforcement or getting in the way of life. Like for instance, was it a year or so ago when those folks jumped out on the 110 and disrupted the highway
Hmm.
in the middle of the day.
Hmm.
Um, I got a problem with that. What happens if one of those people on the highway was trying to get to the hospital, or one of those people on the highway, their son or daughter's school just called because they got hurt doing something and they're going to pick them up. It's those things I have an issue with, but I don't consider that protest. I really don't. I mean, that's when you start getting into riots and start getting into the way of things. But if you wanna be on the sidewalk and you wanna hold your picket signs, I have no problem with that. I have no problem with someone funding that. I honestly don't. My problem with protests is that most of the time the people don't know what they want.
Or even why they're there.
Right. And so, you're angry about whatever. Okay, Help me understand what you're actually angry about.
Mm.
What would you like to change? Do you know what's wrong? Do you know what you want to change? Well, that's the reason why politicians don't pay attention to you. Because first off, they know that these protests aren't going to last. Because no matter how angry you are, eventually that anger starts to dissipate over time. If you remember like Occupy Wall Street, I mean, it's just like all of a sudden they start to just go back home.
Mm.
And part of that is, you're using your anger as the protest instead of using some level of research and some level of thought to say, here's what I don't like.
Mhm.
Here's what I would prefer it to be. Well, now we got something to talk about. And then you got to actually get out there and vote. And from my research, almost a third of eligible voters in this country didn't vote during the last election.
Mhm.
And in fact, we had Prop 50. One of the reasons why they call it Prop 50 is because 50% of eligible voters didn't show up.
Yeah.
But yet you want to protest.
Yeah.
So
Crazy, right?
yeah.
Yeah. I don't understand the thing that's been most interesting for me since I started spending more time in this part of the world is I just don't understand how anything exists. Like the fact that people can protest without really understanding what's going on or understanding how to argue what they don't like versus what they do like.
But where are they going to learn that?
Well, this is where the news media plays into it. I mean, like the news is publishing stuff, and this is all across the board. Like all traditional, linear news outlets are completely co-opted, right? So there's nothing coming out that actually educates people anymore. There's nothing that comes out that actually kind of speaks the truth. It's all super slanted in one direction or the other.
That's not the news media's fault.
Well, they're privately owned companies that could tell the truth.
No, that's not the news media's fault. That's our fault.
Well, we have to vote with our feet. We just got to turn
If
shit
we
off.
if we demanded better information from our media outlets, they would comply,
Agreed.
because then that would give them more clicks, it would give them more advertising. It's a business.
Hmm.
You have to stop blaming organizations for their incentives. You got to change the incentives. It's not the media's fault that it does that. It's all those people who are clicking on that newscast and watching it and then running out in the street and yelling and screaming because of it.
So the change has to be bottom up.
It has to be from the people.
Yeah.
And so even with my criticism of protesters, I also feel a bit of empathy because a lot of them honestly don't know. That's what makes you protest,
Mm.
is that you're angry about something and you don't know what else to do.
Mm.
And so I do feel for them, but the way we have to do it is we have to help people understand the way public policy works. The way change actually works, and help them mature past that. But these kids are growing up in schools that don't talk about government anymore, except George Washington and Abraham Lincoln. But they don't really get deep into politics. Kids come out at 18 where they can finally vote, and they don't know the slightest thing about the way voting works.
Mm.
I ask people all the time, we have a gubernatorial election coming up in California. How do we elect the governor? Most people still think that for the governor, you have one in the Democratic Party, one in the Republican Party, and then they run against each other in the general. That's not how that works.
No.
Not in California. California has a top two primary system.
And it can be Republican against Republican.
Yes,
Yeah.
it can. And so
I'm surprised I know that.
and I'm surprised that most people don't know that, but the schools aren't teaching them that.
No.
Nobody's teaching them that. The average person does not have the basic knowledge about how government works. And so they think it's all about money and it's all about these other things when it's really about you.
Hmm.
And number one, you have to stop expecting the government to do everything for you, because that's not the government's job. The government's job is to get the heck out of your way so you can do what you need to do. And then the other thing is you have to learn the way it works. You got to learn incentives. And for incentives of politicians want to stay in office. So if you have a legitimate problem and you have a group of people who have that same problem and you guys vote, then guess who's going to listen to you?
Hmm.
They have to now, whether they want to or not, because they want to stay in office. But if you're yelling and screaming out in the street
Or going off on X or Twitter or whatever.
or whatever, and you don't vote, why should anybody listen to you?
Yeah, it's true.
It's just not going to happen. So that's the part that frustrates me. But even though it frustrates me, I also feel sorry for people because they were never taught these things.
Hmm.
You know, one of the things that my father taught me as a child, which was the most critical lesson that he could have taught me, was he said, everything is your fault.
Right from day one.
Everything.
Yeah.
And I would come home sometimes and, oh, and he'd say, "Oh, you got into another fight? Yeah, but the guy did this to me." He said, "Okay, but what did you do then?
Hmm.
How did you get into that situation? And then how did you react once he did that thing? Well, it's still your fault."
Hmm.
And so I was raised with, and this is the way I've raised my kids. Everything is your fault. Everything. And that's exciting because I can work on fixing me.
Hmm.
I can't fix you. I can try to fix me.
What do you think it is? Do you think it's just like a lack of education? Do you think it's a laziness? Do you think it's, so many people in this country are under such economic pressure, especially with inflation and all this other craziness that's going on, that they just don't have a time to really do a in-depth dive on all the issues? Do you think it's just like a lack of interest? Like it's easier to be angry than to be educated?
I think it's all of those things.
Yeah.
I think it's all of those things. One of the problems is because we have a grievance culture right now, is that
What do you mean by grievance culture?
is that everybody is angry about something. And they're not angry about themselves. They're angry about what someone else is doing, and normally they don't even know who that person is. It's the system. It's the wealthy. It's the something else. It's them. And the problem is, your mind gets used to that anger.
Hmm.
And the mind, and I got this from Ed Milet's podcast, but the mind moves towards comfort. The brain wants certainty. And so there's a reason why someone who's been in prison for 10 years comes out and wants to go back. Not because it's better, because there's certainty there. I know what I'm walking into. My mind is used to it. And so your mind tells you, no, no, you need to be there. There's a reason why people in abusive relationships go from that one to the next abusive relationship, because your mind is comfortable there. You say, "Oh, I know this."
Mm.
And the difficult part, and I've had to do this with a lot of parts of my life, is going against the comfort in your brain, because your brain will actually rebel when you start saying, "No, I want to start learning these things. I want to start doing better." Your brain's going to say, "Whoa, whoa, hold on. We're over here. This is what we enjoy doing." But the wonderful thing that happens is that the more you do it, your mind will rewire over time to say, "Okay, this is what we're doing now." And then that becomes comfort. Now the better thing can become comfort. But initially, you got to fight your own mind in order to get there.
Like a new baseline.
Yeah.
I don't know. I studied political philosophy in university, and I can't remember if it was like Plato or Aristotle or Machiavelli or Hobbes or Locke or whoever it was, but there was one political philosopher writing back in the 17 or 1800s that was saying, it was talking about how to manipulate the masses and how to control the masses. I think it was Machiavelli actually, because he was quite mischievous. But he was saying like keeping a population constantly distracted with things that aren't important.
Yes.
So and then only when the population is fully distracted all the time with all these things can you get on and do real government work, because then they're not trying to tell you how to govern. So like and for years I've been thinking about this, like China has a food shortage because they have some avian flu or some pig flu, and we were covering that for the New York Times. But they don't talk about that in the Chinese media. They're talking about what the United States is doing and how they have to prepare, or something with Taiwan or blah, blah, blah. And that was how they distracted people. But in the United States, it's the same thing going on. Like you see this Epstein file stuff, you see maybe US UFO disclosure coming soon, and you see like, and it keeps the American electorate completely off balance,
Yes.
and they have no idea what's going to come next. And this is how you kind of maintain this longevity of staying in power. This is how you get real government work done behind the scenes, behind the
Mhm.
curtain, when all this craziness is happening out in front. And I was wondering if you see that as well, or if I'm just kind of going off.
I absolutely see it, but I still don't blame politicians. I blame the people who keep voting because what happens is, so like, there was some research I read last year that said the reelection rates for Congress, for the House of Representatives, it was around 96%, and for the Senate it was around 88%. And but the approval rating for Congress, according to Gallup, was 23%.
Hmm.
So how do people keep getting reelected? You know, and this is why even on our podcast we talk about politics, but we don't talk about it in terms of being for or against someone, but trying to put as much information out there as possible so that people can see both sides of everything. And so I end up arguing both sides,
Mm,
you know, uh, because I'm not trying to convince you of my thought process. I'm just trying to convince you to do your own research,
yeah,
you know. But
that's where the argument has to start.
yeah, but June 2nd is the primary.
Hmm.
June 2nd. We'll see how many people show up. How many people who are angry right now about the way the world is, so many people who want to protest and jump out in the street and do all this other kind of stuff. Let's see how many of them show up to the polls because everybody talks about November, but nobody talks about June.
Yeah, that's wild, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And if you don't think about June, why are you thinking about November?
Yeah, because it doesn't fucking matter.
Yeah, you need both. And so people have to start thinking independently. And so that was why, when I started posting content, like I have a series that I call Nuance, where I go into a lot of different things, different narratives, and I try to break down some of the unknown pieces in that, to try to help people understand. Like I did one on mass incarceration, and tried to help people understand that, if you were growing up in the 80s in America during the crack era when crime was crazy, and at the time, the accusation was that the police didn't do anything at all, that the police would just drive past these open air drug markets. And so the public was yelling and screaming for something to be done, and that was part of what ended up being what they call the crime bill,
Mm,
was that people wanted the police to get involved and they felt like the police weren't getting involved. And so, yes, they swung a little bit too far in the other direction, but understanding that this didn't come from what people thought it did. People just thought it came from, well, they just want to lock up a bunch of black folks.
mhm.
Well, that wasn't the whole thing because I remember those times when people would, when, over a weekend, you'd have, a dozen people killed, and it was crazy.
Mm,
And so getting people to understand nuance, what it does is it cools the temperature of all that anger. Because when you realize that you don't know everything, it's hard to get angry. And that's why I don't get angry when a lot of these things happen because the first thing I do is ask myself, what do I not know about this?
mm,
And that's after a couple of days because a lot of times when something first happens, I don't say anything at all. I don't even think about it
mhm.
because, it just happened. And more often than not, the initial news reports of it
Are wrong.
are absolutely wrong, are dead wrong. And people will start rioting over a headline. You didn't even read the article. You just saw a headline and all right, let's get our picket signs and go out in the street.
Don't you think the media should also have some accountability though for publishing incorrect information?
No.
So it's 100% on the reader.
Yes.
I respect that opinion, but I also think I worked in the media for a long time, and I know back in the day we did try to get it right. Whatever's happening there now is far from that. But I still think like, because again, that initial incitement of anger can be curbed.
Yes, but if people start seeking out like the news that I watch now, is a lot of independent journalist organizations, and I watch both sides, and I feel like I'm getting maybe not the whole truth, but I feel like I'm a lot closer.
Mhm.
And you know, the more we demand better news, the more we'll get better news. For me, I just believe everything is on the people.
Mhm.
I believe that the world's problems are on the people. We have to fix that. Stop asking the politicians to write a law to fix it. We have to fix it.
Mhm. I think that's the healthiest attitude.
But that's sustainable.
It is if you've got people who are willing to put in the time and the effort.
Yes.
Yeah.
And I know that a lot of people are living busy lives. They got a million things going on. And I'm not going to try to pretend like it's easy because it's not.
Yeah.
And so what we try to do with our podcast is we try to put out just information.
Mm.
We try to put out nuance. We don't take a stand on anything politically or anything that's a big narrative. We don't take a stand on any of them. We try to explain as many sides of it as we can research
Mhm.
and say, look, now you can make a decision.
Yeah, I think that's nice.
Instead of, well, I'm on the left or I'm on the right, and here's what I feel because my favorite pundit said so or my favorite politician said so. That's lazy.
I think that a lot of people who are in the middle, and I definitely feel like I'm one of them. Um, I think at the end of the day, we're all just tired. Like I feel like there's so much yelling in both directions that you end up just kind of tuning it out. And
Yeah.
I think that's the worst thing that can happen in a democracy. And I think that's also part of the plan.
It's fair that that's part of the problem, but that's why and for the longest time I didn't say anything.
Hmm.
But my wife kept getting on me. She was like, "Well, you got all these opinions. Why don't you say something?" And she used to tell me, she said the reason why the extremes win is because the moderates keep their mouth shut.
Mm.
Which,
Interesting.
which is true, but when you're moderate, how do you get angry? It's like it doesn't make sense.
I sit here across from you as a, mid 40s white male from North America, and I've never voted. So I was outside of Canada when I was 18 or 19, whenever that first election was, and I forgot to register. I was young and silly, and I missed it. And then after that, I just lived in countries where I couldn't vote for the country that I was in. And then I was so detached from life back in Canada that I didn't bother because I stopped watching the news, stopped reading the news, stopped being involved in all politics in any way, shape, or form. So you have to imagine, like I've lived my entire life in countries that I can't vote in, and I think it's given me a really interesting perspective because, and maybe that's why I lean more on institutions causing part of the problems versus the people because I've been in situations where I can't actually do anything about it. Like I can't vote. So I vote with my feet, or you start identifying, institutions that might be able to behave better to lower the temperature.
Yeah. Yeah, but I've always voted. Um and I believe that that's one of the ways. That's one of the ways, but yes, voting with your feet, voting with what you decide to click on.
Mm.
That's huge these days.
What you decide to eat.
Yes. What you decide to eat, all of those types of things.
Yeah.
And we're in a culture right now, so it's not just the grievance part isn't the worst part. The worst part is everybody's pointing outward and no one's pointing inward. No one's saying I'm part of the problem.
Mm. Yeah, this country, the people who live here have a real habit of passing the buck.
Yes.
Yeah.
And a lot of it is, when someone is running for office, and they come out and they say, "Hey, that problem that you're having, that's not your fault.
Mm.
It's because these people are doing this to you.
Mm.
That's why you have that problem. You didn't do anything wrong." And people unfortunately believe that because it's easy to, whew, okay, well, it's not my fault. So I'm just going to wait for this politician I just voted for to come in and fix these things.
Mhm.
Politicians can't fix things. Laws can't fix culture.
Mhm.
People have to fix culture.
Yeah.
You can't write enough laws. And so even with all the gun control foolishness, oh, we need more gun laws. Okay. Do you realize how ridiculous the laws are right now?
I'm not 100% aware.
Well, yeah, and I read a lot of them because I read, especially as much time as I spend on California DOJ's website, because I have to keep up with the law because it changes all the time, especially for concealed carry.
Mm.
They're trying to change it as often as they can to make it harder. But you're only making it harder on the law-abiding citizen. You're not making it any harder on the criminal. All these laws, you look at all the laws in California, especially the last few years, the laws that have come through the legislature. Find me one that actually affects the criminal.
Well, the criminal won't follow the law. They'll just break the law to
Exactly.
do whatever they want to do.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Whereas here I am, I'm trying to follow the law, but I can carry here, but not there, and do it this way, but not that way, and all these different types of things. I have yet to see a criminal put in for a concealed carry permit.
Would you ever leave?
Huh?
Would you ever just leave the US?
No.
No.
I love this country.
Yeah.
I absolutely love this country. I might be one of the few these days, but but I love this country, and that's part of the reason why I'm so critical
Mhm.
is because I love this country. There's nowhere else I want to be.
Well, I really like your take on it being on the individual and having us all to up our game a little bit to make sure that we read and make ourselves aware of what's really going on and understand what the laws really say and understand the nuances of a situation before becoming outraged about it. And I think the world would be a much better place if that happened.
Yeah, it's gonna be a hard road. I don't have all the answers. I still don't know how to do it, but that's one of the things that myself, my wife, and a lot of people I know are pushing for, is just pushing for people to start thinking independently.
Yeah, it's tough. I mean, we've got like what, like a 6,000 year history of a herd mentality. Gonna have to break that at some stage.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, I guess that's, one of the traits of being autistic is that I don't kind of think the way everybody else thinks, and so it's a little bit probably a little easier for me than it would be for some people.
Yeah, but I think that's the important bit, right? Is just and it's great you have a podcast and you're able to share this opinion with other people. Like I'm gonna, like I'm gonna start going through your podcast and picking out these nuances and start listening in just to get some because everyone else is online is just yelling at everyone else. It's too much.
But it's hard to yell when you realize that you don't know it all.
I think it's easier to yell when you don't know it all.
No, no, I'm saying, but when you realize, when you accept that
Yes.
you don't know it all.
Yeah.
And so even when I get passionate about things, I'm still giving a lot of caveats and, well, this is from what I've researched. This is from what I understand. I'm not sure. I could be wrong on this. And just putting it out there. And there are some times that I am dead wrong. Awesome. Then I can change and be better. I actually apologized on one of our podcasts because something I had said a year prior turned out to be wrong.
Mhm.
Awesome.
Yeah.
I was wrong. Now I'm better. I love this.
Well, I think it's great to be wrong. Like,
Oh
I
yeah.
think, I mean, like, if you can be wrong and then talk to other people who know more than you and educate yourself by reading, and then come out 12 months later and be like, hey, I've upgraded my opinion about this issue. I said something a year ago, and now I believe that I was wrong because of this, 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 and this. I think that makes you a better person.
I do, and that's why I had some people say, "Oh, well, that was brave to admit on the podcast you were on." That's not brave at all.
Mm,
For me, that's exciting because now I'm better than I was when I said those statements.
mhm.
Now I'm smarter than I was when I said those statements. That's that's exciting for me. I enjoyed that.
Self-improvement, self-awareness, and self-education will make democracy stronger.
Absolutely,
Wow.
absolutely,
Oh, fuck, it's a wild ride, isn't it?
it is.
I think I'm voting with my feet though because I can't vote here. I think I'm heading out soon. I'm ready for a more alpine village life.
So, have you considered becoming a citizen or?
Yeah, I mean it's been an option off and on, but it's not the lifestyle and the place I think I want to settle indefinitely. I've been all around the world and I've been privileged to live in Europe and the Middle East and Asia, and there's just other places I feel more comfortable and more quiet. But it's a great place to be a podcaster because
Yeah.
everyone's yelling at the top of their lungs and everyone wants to. And the narcissism in LA is beautiful because everyone wants to talk about themselves.
Yes. Yes, they do.
Not that we fall into that category.
No.
We're above it.
Well, I talk about myself, but I also love to talk about what's wrong with me. So,
There's the difference right there. A little self-depreciation goes a long way, right?
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, that's how I get better.
So, I can't thank you enough for coming on the podcast, man. This has been a lot of fun. I could do another 4 hours with you just on all this political craziness that we live in. But,
Yeah, this has been great.
yeah, no, I really appreciate your time.
Absolutely.
So look, where can we, the consulting that you're doing, where can people find out more information about that, the cybersecurity stuff?
So the actual consulting I do through our company, which is August Shell, August like the month, and Shell SCHELL .com. That's where my boss and mentor runs the company,
Mhm.
and I've been working for him for 16 years now. I worked for him when I was in government. He was my boss in government. He was my boss before I got into government, and so so that's August Shell. I mean, and in terms of the classes, it's cyberpathways.technology.
That's for the youth, program?
Yes.
Yeah.
But I also do classes for adults as well.
Okay.
The adults, I charge them a nominal fee, but the kids, they get it for free.
Great. Yeah.
They get everything for free.
And the podcast with your wife?
Podcast is Love, Growth, and Narratives on YouTube and all the rest of them, Spotify, Apple Podcasts and all that kind of stuff.
Mhm.
And yeah, it's fun.
And if people wanna, do some shooting training with you?
They would reach out to me through the podcast. I haven't separated everything yet,
Mhm.
but if they, like on Instagram, the Love Growth and Narratives podcast Instagram, if someone just sent me a DM on there or through Facebook or even on YouTube, then if they're in the area, then absolutely.
That's great. I'll put all these links in the description and stuff like that.
I appreciate it.
Is there anything we haven't talked about today that you wanted to get into, or are you feeling good?
I feel pretty good.
I think we crushed it. We talked about a lot. We're 2 hours and 40 minutes into this bitch.
Yeah, yeah. Yeah, I didn't get a chance to talk about, the marriage and all that kind of stuff, but yeah, that's good, the kids stuff, but
Well, we can check it out on your podcast.
oh yeah, because we talk about all of that. I mean, we've even had, like personal arguments on the podcast,
Mhm.
because we want to show this is how we have discourse.
Mhm. I think every married couple argues about everything all the time. It's just whether you can finish an argument and then somehow be on the same page at the end of it, right? Or at least respect each other's
Yeah,
differing
it's
opinions.
it's about respect, and one of the things that I was taught growing up, which I totally disagree with now, where they say don't argue in front of the kids. I think that's the worst advice in the world. When my wife and I argue, hey Joseph, come on in here, you got to hear this,
Mhm.
because of the fact that we're not fighting each other, we're fighting the problem.
Mhm.
And the way we have discourse, I want my son to learn from,
Mhm.
which is why I've always allowed my kids to be critical of me, and because I want them to learn how to advocate for themselves and learn how to have civil discourse.
Yeah. It's amazing. Like I always make a joke that when I was in university, we always had to debate. And so we would take political theory classes and we would take one political theorist versus another and say which version of society is better, this version, which is autocratic, and this one, which is more democratic. And then I would say, oh, I want to argue the democratic side. And then the professor would be like, okay, great. You two are going, but you have to argue his position. You have to argue his. So I would end up having to argue the position I didn't believe in. And that's called critical thinking.
I
And
was
that's,
raised that way.
but no one does that anymore.
My father made me do that.
It's the best tool in the world for understanding other points of view and not becoming enraged when you hear other points of view.
Yeah.
And no one does it anymore. And I was always making jokes that I would love a refund on my university tuition because I learned a great skill that no one uses anymore.
If you can't steel man the other side,
Yeah.
then you really don't know anything.
I agreed.
And to steel man the other side, that means you have to actually listen.
Go figure.
Yes. Yeah. And so that's one of the things, even when I get into discourse with people, hey, let me make sure I understand what you're saying.
Mhm.
And I try to steel man their argument. And what it tells them is, first off, someone is actually listening to them. I am actually listening to them.
Mhm.
And it helps me to make sure that I'm arguing the right thing. But most of the arguments on the right and left, they're arguing past each other. They're not even arguing about the same things.
That's the truth.
And so that's why they can't seem to get along, because they can't even agree to what exactly you're arguing about.
And that's why nothing feels like it gets done.
Right.
Yeah. Crazy out there, isn't it?
It is. It is.
Yeah.
But it's going to get better.
I'll invite you to my little alpine village in the middle of nowhere where there's no politics.
There. I'm there. I'm there. I'll leave my phone at home. I'm there.
We'll do it for sure. Well, look, Freddie, thank you so much for joining the podcast. Come back anytime. And I loved your insight. I loved your experience. And yeah, keep on trucking and good luck with the podcast.
I appreciate it. We're probably going to have to get you on ours so you could talk about your trips, because those are things that we would never be able to do.
I'd love to come on anytime. Yeah, just let me know. Like I can talk about my adventures for years. So I've got
That's some awesome stuff there. So
it was a good way to spend my youth. I'll tell you that. Yeah, I got to see the fucking world.
that's awesome.
Thank you, Freddie.
Yeah, appreciate it.
Take care, everyone.
All right,
Cheers.
thanks.
Bye bye.